Chapter 826. Finally, after waiting for an unknown amount of time, Lin Yu looked at Lu Feng with a complicated expression. There was an indescribable color in his eyes. He allowed a long sigh and said slowly, "Lu Feng, don't you want to ask?" Lu Feng chuckled and shook his head. "If you want to say it, then you'll definitely say it. If you don't want to say it, then what's the point of me asking?" Lu Feng had made it very clear. If Lin Yu didn't want to say it, then Lu Feng wouldn't ask anything. He wouldn't force Lin Yu to ask anything. Lin Yu was really happy with Lu Feng's attitude. In Universe 2, when people interacted with each other, the strong were respected. The strong were qualified to know everything, while the weak had to serve the strong. Although Lin Yu was now an immortal realm existence, an emperor realm existence, he wasn't afraid of facing a high-level true god head-on. However, Lu Feng was even more terrifying to the extent that there was no limit to how terrifying he could be. Previously, he was a half-step true immortal disciple of a high immortal sect. He had transformed into a water caltrop and possessed the power of a mid-level celestial immortal. It could be said that he was endlessly terrifying. Crushing someone like Lin Yu is absolutely easy. It could be said that it was like slaughtering an ant. However, such a terrifying existence was suppressed by Lu Feng with a single blow. It was suppression, not defeat. This proved that Lu Feng's terror was absolutely indescribable. He didn't need to use many trump cards to defeat a mid-level celestial immortal existence. His strength had definitely surpassed the mid-level celestial immortal existence. Therefore, although he was one level higher than Lu Feng in terms of cultivation level, the gap between them was like heaven and earth. Therefore, Lu Feng was completely dominant between the two of them. Lu Feng was very powerful and terrifying. He could clearly see this. However, he treated this matter according to Lin Yu's wishes. This also proved that he really respected Lin Yu. After a short period of silence, Lin Yu finally opened his mouth. "Actually, my name is really Lin Yu." Lu Feng was slightly taken aback, then nodded gently. He didn't say anything, but just listened quietly. After saying this, Lin Yu fell silent again. However, this time, the silence was extremely short. He thought for a moment and still spoke. "Lu Feng, in the memory I just received, there is some knowledge about this world. In this world, there have been 11 eras, the 4 desolates, the 6 antiquities, and the current 11 eras. There are 11 eras, and each of them has lasted for countless years. The span is far beyond anyone's imagination. Times were changing, but there were some things that hadn't changed. That is, Earth. Earth, of course. Earth, Earth. Earth, Earth, of Earth, of the yellow of the Earth. And Earth. In every province, there's an emperor-level sect stationed there. And the emperor-level sect in our Qingyuan province is an immortal sect." Lu Feng didn't know about this. In the beginning, when he saw that the immortal sect was established in such a remote mountain, he only thought that this immortal sect was a very ordinary sect. However, the later development made him realize that the immortal sect was very powerful. It could even be described as terrifying. As time went on, he became even more certain of this thought. Now, after hearing Lin Yu's explanation, Lu Feng finally understood. He finally understood that the supreme immortal sect was actually the Overlord race of this continent. The Qingyuan Prefecture is one of the top 10 prefectures in the Yellow Springs continent. The Upper Immortal Sect is also a famous and powerful sect in the Yellow Springs continent. In the entire Yellow Springs continent, among the 60 Emperor-level sects, the Immortal Sect is a terrifying sect that could be ranked in the top 5. An indescribable light appeared in Lu Feng's eyes. He never knew that the Immortal Sect was actually such a powerful and terrifying sect. It was actually shocking to such an extent. Among the 60 Emperor-level sects, it was enough to be ranked in the top 5. This meant that their foundation was absolutely terrifying. Looking at Lu Feng's strange expression, Lin Yu continued, "Originally, the Immortal Sect was just an ordinary Emperor-level sect. They occupied the huge Qingyuan province, causing many other emperor-level sects to eye them covetously. Their position as the overlord of the Qingyuan province was in danger. However, at the most critical moment, the sect master of the immortal sect, the Immortal King, had a miraculous breakthrough. He actually entered the realm of the flowing time, immortal venerable. A flowing time, immortal venerable, such a powerful existence. And when the Immortal King became a flowing time, immortal venerable, it directly changed the immortal sect completely. The moment he became a flowing time, immortal venerable, his sect transformed into a true overlord sect, becoming one of the top 5 emperor-level sects. Lu Feng nodded lightly, an indescribable color in his eyes. Lin Yu didn't understand what Lu Feng's gaze meant because he really couldn't understand. That was why Lin Yu said so much, because he knew that there was already a huge conflict between Lu Feng and the immortal sect. It could be said that if the immortal sect knew of Lu Feng's existence now, they would probably have already started to hunt down Lu Feng. Therefore, Lin Yu told Lu Feng everything about the immortal sect in his memory, hoping that Lu Feng could make preparations in advance. Hearing this, Lu Feng nodded lightly. Lin Yu naturally didn't understand the strange look in his eyes. In fact, Lu Feng was only amazed by the immortal sect. He didn't feel much fear. 5 days, as long as 5 days passed, he would completely recover. And once he completely recovered, it meant that he could once again step into the forbidden mythological realm at any time. At that time, he would really be invincible. Although there was an immortal supremacy in the immortal sect, Lu Fenglai didn't have anything to fear. If he really provoked Lu Feng, he could just go directly to the immortal sect, shatter the forbidden mythological realm, enter the invincible realm, and use the ultimate immortal technique. At that time, not to mention the immortal supremacy, even the entire immortal sect would be completely turned into ashes in front of Lu Feng's ultimate immortal technique. Of course, he would have to pay an unimaginable price for that. Therefore, unless it was absolutely necessary, Lu Feng would definitely not take action and do such things. After a while, Lu Feng's expression returned to normal. He looked at Lin Yu and nodded lightly. It's okay. I understand this. Although the immortal sect is very scary. But if they really provoke me, then I won't be the only one who will be unlucky. If it was someone else who said this, Lin Yu would probably laugh crazily. But this time, it was Lu Feng who said this. When he saw Lu Feng's heaven-defying leap and terrifying battle, when he knew that Lu Feng was the ultimate king, the most powerful emperor of the current era, he understood completely. Lin Yu knew that Lu Feng wouldn't say this casually. Since he said this, it meant that he really had enough confidence to do so. Although he didn't know the reason, the words "emperor of the current era" were enough to make Lin Yu believe it without a doubt. Looking at Lu Feng, Lin Yu nodded lightly and continued, "You should already know that the immortal sect is one of the most terrifying emperor-level sects in the current era. However, emperor-level sects are still the most powerful sects in a province. And on the continent, the most powerful sects are emperor-level sects. Emperor-level sects. That was the true overlord sects. Legend has it that the emperor-level sects have the most powerful flowing time immortal supremacy. They have more than one flowing time immortal supremacy. Other than that, there are many immortal kings." Lu Feng exhaled softly, and a trace of fluctuation flashed through his eyes. In the second universe, there were 14 continents, and on each continent, there was an emperor-level sect. The power and influence of an emperor-level sect in the original universe was probably enough to wipe out the alliance of all the races. The remnants of the primordial immortal devil era were indeed terrifying, incomparably terrifying, as if he didn't see Lu Feng's expression. Lin Yu had already lowered his head slightly, and there was an extremely complicated look in his eyes. "Lu Feng, do you know the name of the only emperor-level sect on the Yellow Spring continent?" Lu Feng frowned slightly and shook his head lightly. He had only just found out that the continent under his feet was called the Yellow Spring continent. How would he know anything else? Lin Yu didn't look at Lu Feng, and he continued talking to himself. "The most powerful sect is called Lin Lang Tian. Lin Lang Tian isn't actually an organization of a single sect. It should be considered an alliance of sections. And this alliance is made up of three aristocratic families. The three aristocratic families are the Lang family, the Tian family, and the Lin family. There is no need for him to say the rest of the words, because at this time, Lu Feng had already guessed and thought of it. Obviously, Lin Yu also understood that Lu Feng must have thought of it. A helpless, bitter smile hung at the corner of his mouth. That's right. Lin Yu, got my name because of the Lin family, the most powerful aristocratic family in the Lin Langtun. As expected, Lu Feng took a slight breath. He didn't expect Lin Yu to be a member of the Lin family and a disciple of an emperor-level sect. Such an identity was really too noble. However, after thinking about it for a while, Lu Feng believed it. After all, when Lin Yu had just transformed, it was really too shocking. Now that he thought about it carefully, he was afraid that even an emperor-level sect wouldn't be able to do such a shocking thing. Only an emperor-level sect could do such a thing. Your status in the Lin family of Lin Langtian shouldn't be low, right? After all, your aptitude is right there. And what you just did, I'm afraid it wouldn't be easy even for an emperor-level sect. At this point, Lu Feng could guess. After all, no matter how terrifying Lin Langtian was, it was impossible for every disciple to use these things. If that was the case, then Lin Langtian wouldn't be the overlord of the Yellow Spring continent, but the ultimate overlord of the entire second universe. Then, what is your identity? Chapter 827. This was Lu Feng's biggest doubt. He knew that Lin Yu's identity was not simple, but to what extent, he did not know. At this moment, Lin Yu was silent, an endless silence. After a long time, he slowly sighed. My specific identity is not in my memory, but I know that I should be a core disciple of the Lin family. The metal paper you saw just now is one of the inheritance methods of the Lin family in Lin Lang Heaven. It is called the Fate Inheritance. It is a very terrifying inheritance method. Its existence is very strange, and the members of the Lin family are also very strange. After they are born, if they have a terrifying aptitude, they will be sealed. Of course, it is not a seal, but a kind of transfer. The power of one's bloodline and heaven-defying aptitude will be transferred to the Fate Inheritance. Then, the Fate Inheritance will grow on its own. After all, the existence of the Fate Inheritance can be said to be incomparably mysterious. When one's aptitude and bloodline power are transferred to the Fate Inheritance, the power on the Fate Inheritance will continue to grow according to one's aptitude. Finally, when it reaches a certain level, the seal on the Fate Inheritance will be removed, and all the power will return to the owner, who is the one who gave it to you. Hearing this, Lu Feng slightly took a breath, a look of shock on his face. This is really shocking. Sealing one's aptitude and bloodline power on the Fate Inheritance, allowing it to cultivate on its own, and finally taking it back. During this time, the main body can cultivate other things. Although the aptitude is lost, the main body's comprehension is not lost at all. In this way, it is equivalent to two people cultivating. Moreover, the part of cultivating strength had to be cultivated day and night. Thinking about it this way, it was truly terrifying, too terrifying. Lin Yu was naturally aware of such a terrifying thing. It could be said that the younger generation of the Lin family relies on this to cultivate at twice the speed of other young people with the same aptitude. It is no wonder that the Lin family is the #1 family in Lin Lang Heaven, the only emperor-level sect in the Yellow Springs continent. Looking at Lu Feng's slightly shocked expression, Lin Yu finally let out a long sigh. He continued, "The Lin family's inheritance is indeed terrifying. However, it was a pity that this method of inheritance could only be used by those of the Lin family's bloodline. Furthermore, the carrier of the inheritance would definitely be the paper of fate. The bloodline of the Lin family was easy to deal with. However, the paper of fate was an extremely precious item. It belonged to the pinnacle of the 9th grade divine items. Therefore, very few people are qualified to use this thing." After a pause, Lin Yu continued, In my memory, only the core disciples of the Lin family are qualified to use this method of inheritance, although he didn't say anything else. But now, Lin Yu had made it very clear. Lin Yu himself didn't know his exact identity. However, Lin Yu knew that he should be a core disciple. This was because the fate inheritance was something that only core disciples could possess. Lu Feng chuckled and came to Lin Yu's side. He reached out his hand and patted Lin Yu's shoulder gently. It's useless to think about it now. If you want to know, then go back to the Lin family yourself. You are an emperor-level monster. Moreover, you are an immortal emperor-level existence. I'm afraid that even the Lin family can't treat such a monster lightly. Therefore, you can return to the family with glory now. You don't have to worry about anything else. If Lin Yu was just an ordinary person now, it would be useless even if he knew all this. However, he was no longer the ordinary Lin Yu from before. He had already transformed into an immortal-level Lin Yu. A 24-year-old immortal, even in the incomparably terrifying second universe, was considered a heaven-defying genius. Moreover, Lin Yu's immortal was an emperor-level immortal. In that case, his status would be even higher. Therefore, even if he returned to the Lin family now, no one would look down on him or give him any face. After hearing Lu Feng's words, Lin Yu fell silent for a moment. After a long time, he finally nodded his head gently. Yes, since I already know so much, it wouldn't be right if I didn't go and take a look. He had thought it through. He had completely thought it through. Since he already knew so much and was qualified to go there, why should he shrink back and remain stagnant? Since he had decided, he would go. As he spoke, Lu Feng stood up and prepared to tear the void. However, just as Lu Feng was about to ask Lin Yu about Lin Longtian's location, Lin Yu suddenly interrupted him. Lin Yu looked at Lu Feng with slight hesitation, but he still spoke in the end. Lu Feng, I have something to trouble you with. Lu Feng didn't say anything. He just nodded his head gently. Speak. When he saw Lu Feng's expression, Lin Yu didn't hesitate or hide anything. He told him all his hopes. It turned out that Lin Yu wanted to challenge Lu Feng. Of course, this challenge wasn't because Lin Yu had overestimated himself after his transformation and thought he was stronger than Lu Feng. Instead, it was because he had suddenly obtained so much inherited knowledge and power without any actual combat experience. He wanted to fight with Lu Feng so that he could quickly master these powers through battle. Challenging Lu Feng, to put it nicely, was a challenge. To put it bluntly, he wanted to make Lu Feng his sparring partner. Therefore, when Lin Yu spoke, his tone was obviously very hesitant. When he heard Lin Yu's words, Lu Feng knew what Lin Yu was planning. In fact, Lu Feng wasn't in a hurry to leave now. In his heart, the best time to leave would be 5 days later, when he had completely fused with the heaven's path. After all, from then on, he would have truly reached the peak of his life. He would have a strength to protect himself and face everything. Before that, even if he had been just a little bit away, he still hadn't been able to break the restriction and enter the king's domain. Therefore, when he heard Lin Yu's words, Lu Feng didn't hesitate and immediately agreed. In the next few days, Lu Feng completely became Lin Yu's sparring partner. The battle between the two could be said to be really endless. Lin Yu's familiarity with his own body and his control over his power grew stronger and stronger. In the last few days, he had completely absorbed all the experience, and it had become a part of his fighting instincts. Obviously, his strength was also becoming more and more terrifying. Lu Feng believed that with all these battles, the current Lin Yu was absolutely in line with everything a king of massacre should have. He was even the kind of king of massacre at the peak. The supreme power Lin Yu had comprehended was the true essence of the origin. It was similar to the bloodline power of Lin Longtian's Lin clan. After he had awakened, all of these had been completely integrated into his body. Lu Feng believed that if Lin Yu had a supreme power in his domain, then he could definitely become a supreme king in an instant, which was the so-called monstrous emperor-level talent. Of course, this supreme power was the true essence of the origin. It really wasn't that easy to comprehend. After fighting with Lu Feng for 5 days, Lin Yu finally understood his own strength. He knew that he was completely different from the past. He was completely different from the past, when he was only a senior warrior. However, what shocked Lin Yu the most was Lu Feng. It was Lu Feng's existence. Previously, he had only seen Lu Feng's strength, but he didn't have any concept of how terrifying Lu Feng was. Now, when he collided with Lu Feng, he finally understood how invincible Lu Feng felt. This wasn't just a kind of suppression in terms of strength, but also a kind of majesty on the spiritual level. This kind of spiritual existence made him feel a sense of complete submission. It was a feeling that he couldn't resist at all. In the battle with Lu Feng, no matter how much power he used, no matter how extreme his breakthrough was, no matter how turbulent he was, the final result was the same. Lu Feng was always calm and indifferent when facing him. At this time, Lin Yu also began to sigh. He lamented the unbearable sense of despair Lu Feng's opponent would feel when facing Lu Feng 5 days. Lu Feng had only accompanied Lin Yu in battle for 5 days. It wasn't that Lu Feng didn't want to do more, but because after 5 days, he finally completed it. Lin Yu had already retreated thousands of miles away from the vast heavenly tribulation in the void. As he looked at the center of the boundless heavenly tribulation in the distance, Lin Yu's heart was in turmoil. He knew that Lu Feng was already a void immortal. Void immortals only needed to quietly condense their immortal origin source. They didn't need to experience any tribulations at all. However, Lu Feng was obviously transcending a tribulation. He was even transcending those terrifying peak tribulations. Such a scene really made Lin Yu go crazy, and he was dumbfounded. What is going on? The corners of his mouth twitched slightly as Lin Yu took a deep breath. He looked at the heavenly tribulation in the distance and felt an indescribable shock in his heart. It was really a shock, a complete shock. Although the scope of the heavenly tribulation wasn't unparalleled, the level of the tribulation made Lin Yu's heart tremble. He had a feeling that as long as he stepped into the range of the heavenly tribulation, even if it was just a single step, he would be annihilated instantly and turned into ashes. After all, not to mention his battle prowess, just his level alone was enough to make him a true immortal. However, Lu Feng was only a void immortal. Could a void immortal's heavenly tribulation be so powerful? In fact, Lu Feng deserved to go through such a terrifying heavenly tribulation. At this moment, Lu Feng had completed a new and complete transformation. He had already reached the peak of his life, a whole new peak of terror. He didn't know what had happened during the moment of his death. However, Lu Feng knew very well that he had gained benefits during this period of time, benefits that could be said to be shocking. For example, the current heavenly tribulation was the most direct manifestation of the benefits he had received, because now he had already condensed, true truth, holy body, the supreme battle body, the true truth, holy body condensed from the strongest body in the universe, was so heaven-defying that no one could imagine. After all, this was the true truth, holy body condensed after going through the most terrifying heavenly tribulation 4 times. Back then, the great being only went through 3 heavenly tribulations and deliberately condensed his heavenly tribulation to have a terrifying physical body that was comparable to an epic overlord in the supreme level of the universe. However, Lu Feng's physical body was even more terrifying than his. Moreover, Lu Feng had the great demon true body, which was a heaven-defying infinite enhancement. Lu Feng couldn't believe that once he achieved the eternal monarch body, he would be able to resist those powerful overlords with his physical body, even without entering the divine king's domain. The heavenly tribulation was terrifying, but in front of Lu Feng, who had comprehended the true essence of destruction, it was not a problem. If it weren't for the fact that he wanted to see how powerful his physical body was, Lu Feng would have used the power of destruction to disperse the heavenly tribulation. Chapter 8:28. The current heavenly tribulation's power had reached an unimaginable level. There was an illusion that it could destroy the whole world. Although he had become an immortal-level existence, although he was an emperor-level disciple, Although he had the power to confront and even kill any high-level true god, at this moment, Lin Yu was retreating, constantly retreating. 10,000 miles? No. Then 100,000 miles. If that still didn't work, then 1,000,000 miles. Just like this, in a trance, he had already retreated a few million miles away. However, Lin Yu was still worried. He could still feel the strong sense of death surging in his heart. The next moment, he finally hesitated for a moment and retreated a few million miles away. He finally stopped when he was tens of millions of miles away from the edge of the heavenly tribulation. It should be known that his realm was one level higher than Lu Feng's. However, when Lu Feng was going through the heavenly tribulation, he was tens of millions of miles away from the edge of Lu Feng's heavenly tribulation. This was enough to prove how frightened and fearful Lin Yu was of the heavenly tribulation ahead. Finally, countless shocking visions appeared in the heavenly tribulation. All kinds of terrifying thunder, fire, and fire explosions, all kinds of violent winds, and almost all kinds of destructive visions appeared in the heavenly tribulation. In the end, even the heavenly tribulation evolved into some extremely terrifying visions. Those were some peerless fierce beasts that belonged to the Four Desolates era. The heavenly power was so terrifying that it made the universe gasp in admiration. Unfortunately, although such a heavenly tribulation was extremely terrifying, Lin Yu felt that it was nothing compared to Lu Fenglai. It didn't even have the slightest brilliance, because at this moment, Lu Feng was explaining what it meant to be unparalleled in the world, what it meant to be invincible, and what it meant to be at the limit of the Supreme Being, bathing in the endless heavenly tribulation, allowing countless disasters to baptize him. Facing the test of life and death, he was never shaken. Just relying on his physical body, he perfectly resisted everything. Such a scene could be said to have never appeared before. In history, it was the most shocking and most shocking era. Lu Feng, what kind of physical body is that? How can it be so strong to such an extent? Even those ordinary ninth-grade divine items can't compare to his physical body. A ninth-grade divine object is the ultimate divine object that even peak celestial immortals and golden immortals need to use. But such an object can't compare with Lu Feng's body after the release of the Power of Power. After his memories were awakened, Lin Yu understood many things, including the secrets of this realm. He knew that above the celestial immortal was the golden immortal. Golden immortals were divided into 3 levels: ordinary golden immortals, zenith heaven golden immortals, and chaos golden immortals. As for the ninth-grade divine object, it was something that even golden immortals would fight for at all costs. However, this thing that could make a golden immortal go crazy was only comparable to Lu Feng's body at this moment, or even a little worse. How could Lin Yu remain calm after witnessing such a scene? Lu Feng walked around quietly in the heavenly tribulation. The power of the heavenly tribulation was getting more and more terrifying, but Lu Feng still didn't have the thought of using the power of destruction to devour the heavenly tribulation, because he really wanted to see the limit of his body's power of power. At this moment, the strength of his body was under Lu Feng's control. In the past, after he condensed the prototype of the Supreme War body, his body was comparable to a 7th-grade divine object. After he shattered his bloodline and achieved the Supreme Divine Body, his body was comparable to an 8th-grade divine object. It was even more powerful than many saint bodies of truth. It was comparable to those saint bodies of truth at the level of heaven-defying battle bodies of truth. Now, after entering the saint body of truth, Lu Feng felt that his body was so powerful that it made people's hair stand on end. Such a body even gave him a terrifying illusion of overlooking the world and suppressing the era. Lu Feng exhaled softly. There was an indescribable color in his eyes. He looked at the incomparably vast mottled void in the void and hesitated for a moment. Then, Lu Feng smiled. Since I intend to use the most extreme violence to shatter everything, since I have already come this far, let's give it a try. I can feel that the benefits I've received are simply too shocking. He's allowed me to undergo another earth-shattering change, allowing me to enter a whole new level. Now that I have completely completed the fusion, it is time for my power to truly return and display. So this time, let's indulge. Lu Feng chuckled softly. Then he laughed wildly. Then he laughed crazily. After a while, his voice slowly reached Lin Yu's ears. Lin Yu, I'm going to the Star Zone to release my complete power of power. If you want to watch, remember to stay far away. Stay far away. The moment his voice fell, Lu Feng began to madly rush toward the void. The Star Zone was the legendary extraterritorial star world. This was what Lin Yu had told Lu Feng before. Lin Yu had told Lu Feng that the extraterritorial star world was truly boundless. It was a star zone formed by many almighty golden immortals who had sent some obliterated worlds and regions into the void. There were even some terrifying star worlds whose size was not smaller than a continent. Of course, these were just legends. In the second universe, there were only 14 continents. If the star world also existed, wouldn't the total area of the star world be larger than the main world of the second universe? Lin Yu had once introduced the star world to Lu Feng. In addition to being incomparably huge, the most important point was that, strictly speaking, the star world was actually a battlefield that belonged to the true experts. Generally, those who had entered the immortal realm could get rid of all restraints and go to the star world. The destructive power of the immortal realm can be said to be shocking. If a battle broke out on this continent, it would cause inestimable destruction. Therefore, generally speaking, after reaching the immortal realm and being able to get rid of all restraints, the battlefield would be in the star world. It can be said that only the true experts can enter the star world to fight. Lu Feng's mind was filled with everything that Lin Yu had told him. Lu Feng naturally knew what kind of position the existence of Star World was in compared to the entire second universe. It could be said that perhaps those ordinary existences would not enter the Star World to fight, but those existences above the true immortal realm would definitely choose the Star World if they were to fight. After the complete fusion, Lu Feng had entered an indescribable state. Even he himself was not clear about his current power of power. Perhaps only by going all out would he be able to feel his limits and know the extent of his strength. Obviously, the world of stars was the most suitable place. Lu Feng had been direct and powerful all the way. He had not used any profound mysteries. When he had gotten rid of those restraints, Lu Feng had chosen extreme violence. He had forcibly broken through the layers of restraints under the threat of the heavenly tribulation and flew into the endless star world. Lin Yu's eyes almost fell out when he saw this scene. He knew Lu Feng's strength. Obviously, the strength that Lu Feng had displayed now was still a certain distance away from Lu Feng's true peak power of power. However, the indomitable will and extreme violence that Lu Feng had displayed at this moment was indescribable, incomparable, and unbelievable. This was Lu Feng, the extreme violence of Lu Feng. In the void, heaven and earth had collapsed. The space-time of that region had been shattered, and the laws had been reduced to nothingness. The existence of these things was to restrict living beings from leaving their original world. Ordinary immortals, or true immortals, and heavenly immortals were the exceptions. If they wanted to leave, they would ultimately choose to use some profound laws to break away from these restraints. However, at this moment, Lu Feng had not used any profound mysteries. He had completely relied on his own brute force to break through everything and forcibly ascend into the endless star world. Lin Yu's footsteps followed closely. However, Lu Feng's speed was simply too fast. Even if he had to deal with the heavenly tribulation, even if he had to shatter the endless tribulations, his speed did not seem to have any intention of slowing down. In fact, that kind of terror made it impossible for Lin Yu to catch up. When Lin Yu finally arrived at the Star World for the first time, he was suddenly stunned. It was true. He was completely stunned, because everything in front of him was simply too shocking. It was too hard for him to believe. In his awakened memories, there was a saying about the Star World. There were many things about the Star World. However, the Star World in front of him and the Star World in his memories were too different. Too different. This was the Star World that was surrounded by stars, the Star World that was tranquil in the outer domain. At this moment, this place was a terrifying and vast battlefield. It was a world of annihilation and death. As far as his eyes could see, Those stars had been completely shattered and disappeared. Not even the slightest trace of them was left. In the void, Lin Yu could no longer sense any traces of the existence of the laws. At this moment, this place was filled with destruction and annihilation. Lin Yu exhaled softly. There was an unimaginable light in his eyes. At this moment, Lin Yu finally looked into the distance. He looked into the depths of the endless abyss, the source of all destruction, the one and only figure that had existed since time immemorial. Lu Feng, what exactly are you hiding? He already knew what kind of existence the ultimate king was. He already knew how terrifying the existence of an emperor was. This was because in his memories, there was the previous emperor, the great emperor who had traveled through endless time and space. He had an invincible path. However, although that emperor had traveled through countless time and space and was terrifying and invincible in the final era, he was not as abnormal as Lu Feng in front of him. Although his strongest power was a miracle, it was nothing compared to Lu Feng in front of him. Even the existence of the ultimate taboo in his mind seemed to be inferior to Lu Feng. The calamity still existed. However, Lin Yu understood that this calamity, which was no less than the end of the world for him, had become so dispirited in front of this void, immortal, dispirited. It was really dispirited. This was because the current Lu Feng seemed to have entered an indescribable realm. It was a terrifying and invincible realm. With such a cultivation level, his might could be described as unprecedented. Lin Yu could clearly see that Lu Feng's body seemed to have changed. On this body, he vaguely felt like an illusion of a star. It was as if Lu Feng's existence was the real star, the only star in the endless time and space. His body has become even more terrifying. Lin Yu's voice had started to change when he spoke. He didn't do it on purpose, but because he was so shocked that he couldn't control his voice. Previously, Lu Feng's physical body was equivalent to some grade 9 divine objects. However, the physical body that Lu Feng displayed at this moment was even stronger than before. Who would be able to match such a physical body? Who would be able to resist it? Lin Yu exhaled gently. However, the shock in his eyes did not disappear. As time passed, the shock in his eyes became more obvious. This was because he saw Lu Feng in the distance. He was even more shocked. Chapter 829. Lu Feng was in a state of turmoil, a truly terrifying turmoil. His power of power had reached its peak. At this moment, his heart was boiling with an indescribable feeling. Now, he was still at the peak of the void immortal realm, which was the 4th level of the demigod realm. However, his power of power had increased by a lot. According to normal calculations, he should be at the 4th level of the great demon true body, the small success realm of the star great demon body. Of course, he was still at the small success realm. However, Lu Feng did not know why he was able to display the star great demon body, which could only be displayed at the large success realm. This was undoubtedly an incredible scene. He was not at the large success realm, but he was able to display the power that could only be displayed at the large success realm. This was absolutely unbelievable. After all, the existence of the great demon true body was a truly heaven-defying powerful technique. It was more terrifying than those supreme being cultivation techniques. If such a technique wanted to break the restrictions of those cultivation techniques, it would require a terrifying amount of power. Moreover, this was not the only thing that excited Lu Feng. Apart from the great demon true body, Lu Feng's biggest breakthrough was actually the Origin Sutra. Compared to the physical body, the breakthrough of the Origin Sutra was what really excited him. Back then, before Wang Zhan, Lu Feng's origin scripture realm had only been on the verge of becoming a celestial. He hadn't completely entered the celestial realm. The main thing was that Lu Feng did not have enough time at that time. However, it was different now. His cultivation in the Psyche Master realm had actually skipped the divine realm. He had actually entered the large success realm from the small success realm. Of course, this was only the large success realm. Lu Feng had not completely entered the large success realm of the Origin Sutra. If he had really entered the large success realm, then his current realm would have been counted as the divine realm, which was also the immortal realm. However, this is really not bad. After all, I have saved a lot of time. Exhaling lightly, Lu Feng really didn't expect that the benefits he received this time would be so shocking. It could be said that the help this time was almost equivalent to forcibly raising his strength by a huge level. What happened when I was unconscious? What kind of benefits did I get? Benefits, it must be benefits. If he didn't get some heaven-shaking benefits, how could he become such a powerful existence? Lu Feng understood that his transformation this time was really too thorough. If he were to use an ordinary divine item, the effect would be negligible. After all, his accumulation was too exaggerated. But now that he had obtained such an earth-shaking change, it could only prove that the benefits he had obtained were heaven-defying. Exhaling softly, Lu Feng suppressed the doubts in his heart. He had been searching for the answer to this question countless times after he woke up. Unfortunately, he had never found the real answer, so Lu Feng gradually gave up on it. Looking at the countless areas around him that were completely empty, Lu Feng's eyes were filled with an indescribable light. He knew that he had really become more powerful. Previously, he had thought that he could fight a peak divine realm expert head-on. But now Lu Feng didn't think so. This was because he had only displayed the star great demon body. Coupled with the embryonic form of the invincible war body, he had the power to suppress a peak divine realm expert with his cultivation of martial arts. And if he activated two souls and relied on an even more powerful second primordial spirit, perhaps I really do have the qualifications to challenge an almighty, not a divine realm expert, but qualified to challenge an almighty. Even the human king back then couldn't do it, far from it. But Lu Feng, without shattering the forbidden realm, could already see it. The divine king, the holy king, the immortal king, and the demon king. The four taboo kings are in the peak divine realm. Once they use all their power, they should be able to enter the realm of a high-level true god. However, their battle prowess should be on par with any mid-level celestial god. And once they use their supreme divine ability, they should be able to suppress a mid-level divine realm expert and rival a high-level divine realm expert. But I can suppress a peak divine realm expert. There's already a big gap between me and them. I already have the possibility to challenge an almighty. Although it was only a possibility, the meaning of the word possibility was enough, really enough. Lu Feng raised his head and looked at the terrifying calamities dancing in the sky. Now that everything had been tested, Lu Feng would not allow them to continue existing. In the next moment, his soul and body transformed into an indescribable power. Even from far away, Lin Yu could clearly feel it. It was a power of destruction, and the degree of destruction was even more terrifying than the heavenly tribulation. Lin Yu really didn't know where Lu Feng got so many trump cards. Just this alone was enough to make him truly invincible in the same realm. Lin Yu also understood that Lu Feng didn't have so many trump cards. He must have other trump cards that he hadn't used yet. After all, this was the emperor of the current era. The existence of the true essence of destruction itself was a supreme power that surpassed the peak, which was also the true essence of origin that surpassed the peak. If it was the true essence of destruction in the past, it would still be ambiguous if it could devour the heavenly tribulation. But now it was different, completely different, because the current true essence of destruction had already devoured a heavenly tribulation. Now, it had evolved into an even more terrifying and high-profile true essence of destruction. Although devouring the heavenly tribulation couldn't be said to be completed in an instant, the speed at which it devoured the heavenly tribulation was extremely frightening. Soon, the heavenly tribulation that seemed capable of annihilating the entire world disappeared completely. Apart from the annihilation aura that still existed in the Starrealm, it was completely peaceful, as if nothing had happened here before. Time passed slowly. Lu Feng was still standing quietly in the endless empty world. When Lin Yu saw that Lu Feng didn't say anything, he also chose to remain silent and quietly accompany Lu Feng. Time passed slowly. Finally, after a short period of time, Lu Feng raised his head. Although they were separated by a great distance, as an immortal and an emperor-level immortal, Lin Yu could naturally see Lu Feng's subtle expression. However, because he saw it, an indescribable strange color appeared in his eyes. He couldn't imagine why Lu Feng would show such a strange expression. His face was filled with a strange and indescribable horror. The current Lu Feng seemed to have entered an extreme state. Lin Yu had seen Lu Feng in such a state before. That time was when Lu Feng had entered an unbreakable state and easily suppressed the water chestnut. At that time, Lu Feng was absolutely unsolvable and terrifying, shocking the entire era. But now he actually showed such an expression again, such an extreme expression. Could it be that in the next moment, all the mysteries were revealed? Lu Feng's voice appeared, resounding through the sky and the boundless star realm. How much longer do you want to watch? Lin Yu was horrified. Abruptly, he retreated 1,000,000 miles backward. He had never felt that there was actually a hidden existence here. However, such a situation was expected. After all, this was the star realm. Although immortals could come here, immortals could only barely reach this level. Take Lin Yu, for example. Although he was an immortal, his power was comparable to that of a true high-level true immortal. Ordinary immortals would have to put in a lot of effort if they wanted to come here by themselves. Because of this, none of the existences that appeared and fought in this place were simple. All of them were experts. It was also because of this reason that it was absolutely reasonable for a powerhouse to appear here that he couldn't detect. However, knowing this was one thing, Lin Yu was still very frightened. After all, if an expert with such strength wanted to harm him, he could do it with a wave of his hand. In the void, Lu Feng's eyes flashed with sharpness. He finally raised his arm slowly. Do you really think that I can't detect you? Although you are indeed strong, there is still a limit to how strong you are. You are not strong enough to surpass the level of my soul's senses. Therefore, I have already sensed where you are. At the next moment, Lu Feng waved his arm. It was at this moment that a violent force was born and annihilated the chaos, causing the empty void world to once again experience an earth-shattering disaster of annihilation. Darkness, boundless darkness, death, complete and utter death. The universe's starry sky completely collapsed with a single thought. Lin Yu saw it. His eyes were filled with an indescribable color. He looked into the distance, the world that suddenly appeared. He couldn't believe that it was what he saw. The words that came out of her mouth were filled with turbulent emotions. This is the mortal world that is actually golden immortal, that is actually a golden immortal. It is actually a golden immortal. A true golden immortal. Lin Yu never expected that the one who appeared in the void this time would be a golden immortal. After all, these things that appeared in the void belong to a mortal world. Obviously, to be able to do this, one must be at the level of a true golden immortal. The existence of a golden immortal, needless to say, was synonymous with ultimate strength. It was the pinnacle of existence below the true kings. A golden immortal. Chapter 830. Lin Yu was truly frightened at this moment. Golden immortals were considered patriarch-level existences even in emperor-level sections. In those ordinary sects, they were definitely the most terrifying almighty beings. Lin Yu also didn't expect that he would casually encounter an almighty expert the first time he came here. Lu Feng stood quietly at the top of the void. His eyes were full of mockery. I've said it before. Although you are powerful, your strength is still limited. You are far from being able to completely hide from me. When Lu Feng said these words at this moment, perhaps no one could say that Lu Feng was arrogant. Because just now, Lu Feng's violent attack tore apart the mortal world that belonged to a golden immortal. The mortal world shook, and a peerless and exceptionally enchanting existence slowly walked out from it. When he saw her face, Lu Feng was slightly taken aback. A trace of surprise flashed across his eyes. It wasn't just Lu Feng. Even Lin Yu, who was far away, was the same. Encountering a golden immortal was already shocking enough, but encountering a female golden immortal was even more inconceivable. In this era left behind by the immortals and demons, although there were also world-shocking monsters who were women, because of their special nature, their numbers were very few, even to an extreme extent. It could be said that there might not even be one female cultivator among 10 cultivators. As for the golden immortal level, the ratio of men to women reached the level of thousands or even thousands of men to one. It could be said that there might not even be one female golden immortal among thousands of golden immortals. To be able to see a female golden immortal was equivalent to seeing a chaos golden immortal on any random continent. This was the rarity of female golden immortals. Looking at the peerlessly beautiful golden immortal, Lu Feng's eyes only had a trace of strangeness before completely returning to normal. He looked at the golden immortal quietly, then finally spoke slowly. "You came here to spy on me. Do you have any other intentions?" Lu Feng's voice sounded faintly, without the slightest trace of humility in it. His attitude towards a golden immortal was one of complete equality. If an ordinary gold immortal saw Lu Feng like this, they would have already taught him a lesson. However, this female golden immortal was different because she had seen everything from the beginning to the end. She knew how terrifying the young man in front of her was. It was for this reason that she didn't do anything when Lu Feng destroyed a part of her mortal world. Instead, she just watched quietly. Hearing Lu Feng's voice, the female gold immortal was silent for a moment before her voice finally sounded softly. The existence of this voice was like an orchid in an empty valley, giving off a feeling of tranquility. "Actually, I did not come here with any malicious intent. I just sensed the aura of the heavenly tribulation and came here to see what kind of expert is breaking through." Hearing this, Lu Feng nodded gently. He knew that as gold immortals, they were all extremely proud and would not casually say something false. Moreover, Lu Feng also believed that she should be like this. After all, he came here on a whim, and no one knew in advance. Looking at the enchanting female golden immortal, Lu Feng turned around and walked slowly in the direction of Lin Yu. Although the other party was a golden immortal, with Lu Feng's current strength, he really wouldn't be too afraid. He might not be a match for him, but running away was not a problem. And now, he had completely recovered. The completely recovered Lu Feng represented one thing, and that was that he now had the power to shatter that forbidden domain again. He could be said to be an immortal king at any time. Under the most terrifying circumstances, he could even be considered an immortal venerable. Therefore, Lu Feng really had the qualifications to look down on all existences. He really had the qualifications to defeat any golden immortal mighty figure. Those who could become golden immortals were all wise and far-sighted, and as one of the very few female golden immortals, she was even more so. Although deep in her heart, she was really a little annoyed by Lu Feng's attitude, and felt a kind of anger from the bottom of her heart that he destroyed her world. However, she would not show these feelings, because at this moment, she could see clearly that Lu Feng was really indifferent, incomparably indifferent. This indifference was not deliberately faked. She knew that Lu Feng must have a trump card that could make him look at her as equals, or even ignore her. It was also because of this that no matter how many thoughts she had in her heart, she did not make a move or even say anything. Finally, when she saw Lu Feng about to leave, when she saw Lu Feng's back, she suddenly spoke. "Wait a minute." Lu Feng stopped in his tracks and turned to look at her, but unconsciously, he frowned slightly. "Is there anything else?" Although his voice was still calm, anyone could hear the impatience in it. At this moment, Lin Yu swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He knew that Lu Feng was an emperor and was very powerful. He could even suppress a mid-level heavenly god with a single blow. However, the woman in front of him was a golden immortal. The gap between a golden immortal and a heavenly immortal was absolutely impossible to cross. It was a gap that could never be crossed. Facing a golden immortal, Lin Yu never dared to believe that Lu Feng could defeat her. Of course, that was for now. He knew very well that as long as Lu Feng was given some time, then not to mention a golden immortal, Lu Feng would definitely be able to defeat an immortal king. However, that was the future, not the present. Therefore, at this moment, when he saw Lu Feng's impatience, Lin Yu was really shocked. However, it was obvious that the female golden immortal had a very good personality. Facing Lu Feng's completely impatient attitude, she did not show any anger. Looking at Lu Feng, she said slowly, "My name is Lian Ting. You can call me Golden Immortal Lian Ting. Of course, you can also call me by my name." Hearing the Golden Immortal Lian Ting's words, Lu Feng hesitated for a moment and replied, "My name is Lu Feng. You can call me by my name." Hearing the two words Lu Feng, Lian Ting's eyes flashed with countless thoughts. Seeing this, Lu Feng just smiled at his heart, because he knew that Golden Immortal Lian Ting must be thinking about Lu Feng's identity at this moment. However, he was afraid that even if she searched all the famous existences in the entire second universe, she would definitely not be able to match him. Sure enough, after thinking for a moment, Golden Immortal Lian Ting seemed to realize that Lu Feng must be a hidden existence. She looked at Lu Feng and smiled gently. This smile was really full of a kind of beautiful taste that made one's heart sway and soul tremble. "Lu Feng, I'll remember it. Lu Feng, I'm an elder of the primordial sect on the Green Emperor continent. This time, I was quietly cultivating in the Starrealm. Coincidentally, I felt the aura of your heavenly tribulation. At first, I thought that some existence was brought to the Starrealm by their elders to undergo the tribulation. But I didn't expect to see you going through all this. I don't know what kind of calamity this calamity of yours is. Ordinary tribulations were only experienced by demigods, which was the 3 disaster states. Apart from this, only when one did something heaven-defying or condensed some kind of terrifying divine ability would the heavenly tribulation appear. Although she could not see through Lu Feng's cultivation, Golden Immortal Lian Ting could eliminate the first possibility. After all, Lu Feng's power when he just tore apart his world was not at the level of a Golden Immortal, but it was almost there. Golden Immortal Lian Ting guessed that Lu Feng had at least the strength of a quasi-Golden Immortal. Of course, this could only be done if he used all his trump cards. Such an existence naturally could not be at the 3 disaster states. Moreover, the current Lu Feng did not seem to be plagued by any disasters. If he really did something that angered the heavens and attracted the heavenly tribulation, then the heavenly tribulation would never stop until he was dead. However, after Lu Feng used a kind of powerful power just now, he actually annihilated the heavenly tribulation directly. This was enough to prove that he was not willing to experience the heavenly tribulation for the second reason. Therefore, in Golden Immortal Lian Ting's heart, Lu Feng should belong to the last situation, which meant that Lu Feng was condensing some kind of terrifying divine ability. And when she saw Lu Feng, she had such a thought, because she found that Lu Feng was too young. Of course, ordinary Golden Immortals, or even more powerful existences, could already restore their youth. However, unless one could reverse time, even if one regained their youth, there would still be traces of time left behind. However, she really did not see any traces of time on Lu Feng's body. He was really an extremely young existence. Such a young existence had such a powerful power. He was definitely a peerless genius. Therefore, Golden Immortal Lian Ting really wanted to make friends with him. Hearing Golden Immortal Lian Ting's words, Lu Feng was silent for a moment. After a while, he said, "It's not convenient to say this." Could Lu Feng say that he had condensed the sacred truth body and attracted the endless calamity of the universe? Therefore, he could only say this. Hearing this, Golden Immortal Lian Ting was slightly stunned, but she still nodded. After thinking for a while, she looked at Lu Feng and said slowly, "Lu Feng, do you have time? If you do, you can come to our primordial sect as a guest. You should know that our primordial sect welcomes young talents like you the most." After saying this, Golden Immortal Lian Ting looked at Lu Feng expectantly. If an ordinary young existence saw Golden Immortal Lian Ting like this, they would definitely lose themselves. However, Lu Feng did not seem to see anything. He just continued to shake his head. If there is a chance in the future, I will go. But now I can't. Seeing that Lu Feng had turned around and had a resolute attitude, golden immortal Lian Ting could only show a helpless expression. She could see Lu Feng's attitude. Her original intention was to befriend Lu Feng. So after seeing Lu Feng's attitude, she did not do anything excessive. Looking at Lu Feng's back that was gradually disappearing, golden immortal Lian Ting's charming expression finally disappeared slowly. Now, she was filled with an incomparably calm expression. And this should be her true expression. After all, it was definitely not easy to become a golden immortal. Finally, Lu Feng and Lin Yu's figures completely disappeared, but Lian Ting did not leave. She just spoke to the void. What kind of existence is he? Can you tell? As soon as her voice fell, another existence walked out of the void. However, this existence was much stronger than golden immortal Lian Ting. It could not be calculated with reason. He looked at Lu Feng's disappearing figure with an incomparably turbulent expression in his eyes. After a long time, he finally sighed slowly. Chapter 831. What a terrifying young man. I can feel that he's intentionally hiding his cultivation base. Under his concealment, I can't see his true cultivation base. However, I'm sure that his true cultivation base has not reached the true immortal realm. He's at most a peak immortal realm. If Lian Ting was surprised by the man's words before, then what he said after that shocked her completely. You're saying that he's not even a true immortal realm? Doesn't that mean? The man nodded his head with a heavy expression. That's right. I'm afraid he's really an Emperor Realm monster. Although she had already guessed it, she couldn't help but be shocked when she heard the man's words. Her face was distorted as she looked at Lu Feng's back. Then, she let out a long sigh. He's actually an Emperor Realm monster. Could it be that he was groomed by the other sex? Why is it that even our sect doesn't have any information about him? I feel that if the primordial sect has news about him, I should know about it too. After saying that, Lian Ting looked at the man beside her. Her eyes were filled with confusion. The man smiled bitterly when he saw Lian Ting's gaze. I say, young miss, in our primitive sect, there's nothing that needs to be hidden from you, or can be hidden from you. We really don't have any information about this young man in the primitive sect. He's really mysterious. The man's face turned solemn when he said that. Obviously, Lian Ting was also solemn when she saw his expression. An Emperor Realm monster is indeed unprecedented. Without exception, all of them have become the pillars of their respective sections. Even the weakest one has become a terrifying Overlord who's at the Immortal King realm. Although I didn't expect to meet one here, it's not like our primitive sect doesn't have any Emperor Realm monsters. A trace of anger flashed in Lian Ting's eyes when she thought of Lu Feng's attitude of ignoring her. However, when she thought of his identity as an Emperor Realm monster, she hid everything in the depths of her heart. Although she was the miss of the primordial sect, in terms of status in the entire sect, she was at most comparable to that monstrous Emperor-level talent. If one were to say that her status was above that of the monstrous talent, no one would agree with it. This was the nobility of an Emperor Realm monster. They were definitely the best in a sect. Perhaps some people could be on par with them, but no one could surpass them. However, although she had already concealed her emotions, her previous words had already exposed her inner thoughts. Therefore, at this moment, the man beside her understood Lian Ting's thoughts. A bitter smile remained on his face. Young miss, this young man is different from those monsters. There's a huge gap between them. I believe that if he and this young man from our primitive sect are placed together and have the same cultivation level, once the battle starts, the result will definitely be one-sided. There won't even be any suspense. This young man, there is no other possibility. He will be completely suppressed. Hearing this, Lian Ting's eyes were filled with disbelief. How is this possible? Aren't they both Emperor Realm monsters? With the nurturing of my primitive sect, how could he be so weak in front of that person just now? Could it be that the person behind this young man is the sacred land? Apart from this, Lin Ting really couldn't think of any other possibility. Unfortunately, the existence shook his head. He shook his head fiercely. I don't know his identity. However, even if he doesn't have any power, I still believe in my judgment. Young miss, do you still remember? In fact, Emperor Realm monsters aren't the most powerful existences. They're all Emperor Realm monsters, but there's another kind of existence. Their heaven-defying degree is simply incomparable, and they're called the Ultimate King. Ultimate King, Lin Ting naturally heard of it. At this moment, she looked at the existence beside her with a complicated expression. He's the Ultimate King? How is this possible? Of the final kings, there were only the 5 eternal immortals. And after he entered the realm of invincibility, there were only 4 of them left. Could it be that he's one of the 4 ultimate kings? The man was silent. After a while, his expression became complicated. I don't know whether he's the ultimate king or not. However, even if he's not the ultimate king, he must be one of the most powerful existences among the Emperor Realm monsters. He's so terrifying that he'll definitely reach the immortal venerable realm in the future. It's very likely that he'll reach the point where even the era has to acknowledge him. Lin Ting was silent. There was an indescribable turbulence in her eyes. Lu Feng, I really admire you. You can still be so calm in the face of a golden immortal. You know, that's a golden immortal. A golden immortal that's above a heaven immortal. It's countless times stronger than a heaven immortal. You can even treat a golden immortal like this. Really, Lin Yu thought a lot of things to say, but found that he couldn't say anything. In the end, he could only raise his thumb and shake it fiercely. Seeing Lin Yu's appearance, Lu Feng only smiled gently, but didn't say anything. Lin Yu naturally didn't understand that the reason why Lu Feng was so calm and collected was because he had enough confidence in himself. He, Lu Feng, had a trump card that allowed him to face a golden immortal on equal terms. Suddenly, Lu Feng seemed to have thought of something. He looked at Lin Yu and hesitated for a moment before asking, Lin Yu, do you know the primitive sect of the Green Emperor continent? Lin Yu's footsteps paused slightly. He looked at Lu Feng with a strange expression. Do you mean that the female golden immortal, just now, is from the primitive sect of the Green Emperor continent? When golden immortal Lin Ting introduced, just now, she didn't deliberately spread her voice. Lin Yu, who was far away, naturally didn't hear it. Therefore, when he heard Lu Feng mention the existence of the female golden immortal, an indescribable shock appeared on his face. Lu Feng didn't have any other expression, although he knew from Lin Yu's expression that the primitive sect was definitely not simple. However, Lu Feng didn't make a fuss about nothing. He looked at Lin Yu and nodded gently. Lin Yu was silent for a moment. After a while, he said slowly, the Green Emperor continent is considered to be one of the top 5 continents in this era. The primordial sect is the dominant sect in the Green Emperor continent. It is also the only Emperor-level sect. In the entire era, apart from the 3 mysterious nothingness sacred lands, the primitive sect can be ranked in the top 10 or even the top 5 among all the sects. Lu Feng was slightly taken aback. In the next moment, a strange expression appeared on his face. After a long time, a strange smile appeared on his face. The primitive sect is a very powerful sect. Indeed, the primitive sect was really powerful. In the entire era, there were only a few sects that could be compared to it. Previously, when Lu Feng offended the High Immortal sects, if it wasn't for the fact that the High Immortal King in the sect had become a High Immortal Venerable, they would have been completely crushed when facing the primitive sect. Lin Yu, I have fully recovered now. Can you set off now? Lu Feng had planned to set off previously. After all, the second universe was too big. Even if they set off now, it would take a lot of time to reach the Yellow Spring Continent's first state, the Yellow Spring Continent, where Lin Langtian was. However, Lin Yu didn't agree at that time because he wanted to have some time to familiarize himself with his body and the power he suddenly obtained. Therefore, he had been cultivating silently. Now, 5 days had passed, and Lu Feng had fully recovered. As for Lin Yu, it was almost the same. After all, he had accompanied Lin Yu in his cultivation for the past 5 days. Lu Feng also understood Lin Yu's improvement speed. In Lu Feng's opinion, Lin Yu was ready to set off now. Looking at Lu Feng and hearing what he just said, Lin Yu's eyes flashed with a slightly dignified expression. Now, he was really qualified to go to Lin Langtian. After all, a disciple at the peak of the Emperor realm would be highly valued in any sect, even in an Emperor realm sect. Therefore, if he answered Lin Langtian, he wouldn't encounter any difficulties. However, Lin Yu hesitated at this moment. He was even afraid. Seeing Lin Yu like this, Lu Feng smiled. It wasn't a mocking smile, but a faint and warm smile. "Are you afraid?" Lin Yu was slightly taken aback. After a moment of silence, he nodded deeply. Yes, a little. In front of Lu Feng, he had nothing to hide. Although he was a little older than Lu Feng, his experiences were incomparable. However, the things he had experienced couldn't be compared to Lu Feng's. Lu Feng was younger than him, but Lin Yu couldn't compare with him in terms of life experience. Therefore, in front of Lu Feng, Lin Yu always felt like a junior. Hearing Lin Yu's admission, Lu Feng's smile remained. His voice rang out again. At that time, you weren't a monster. Your strength was only that of an advanced warrior. But when you were facing such a colossus like the Immortal Sect, when you were with me, a person whose background you didn't know, you still dared to walk onto the stage and shout out your own voice. You were so brave back then. Back then, when you were undergoing your metamorphosis, you experienced so many dangerous moments and indescribable torment and pain. Yet, you persevered and never gave up. You were so brave back then. Now, you're an Emperor Realm immortal. How can you be so cowardly? Lu Feng, this was not a harsh reprimand, because he had always used a very gentle voice to speak. What he meant was that Lin Yu wasn't even afraid of death. He could even go through those torments that were worse than death. What was there to be afraid of in this world? Lu Feng's words caused Lin Yu to be stunned. Time passed in a flash. After a long time, Lin Yu's voice slowly rang out. Yes, I'm not even afraid of death. What is there to be afraid of? He smiled gently and shook his head. Finally, he looked at Lu Feng. Thank you, Lu Feng. Chapter 832. Lu Feng could tell that Lin Yu had let go of the knot in his heart. Actually, friends aren't allowed to thank each other like this. You and I have experienced life and death together, right? You don't have to be so polite. Lin Yu nodded firmly when he heard Lu Feng's words. If someone else had said this to him, Lin Yu would have suspected the other party's intentions. After all, he was a disciple of the Lin family, the most powerful family in Lin Langtian. His status was incomparably noble. At most, he was trying to worm his way out of this. However, Lu Feng was different. He really didn't need to do this. Strictly speaking, if Lin Langtian found out about Lu Feng's identity and witnessed how terrifying Lu Feng was, they would be the ones trying to worm their way into being friends. Lin Yu knew that Lu Feng really treated him as a friend when he said all this. There was no doubt that it was very touching to have such a friendship in such an era. Lin Yu nodded his head gently. Then, he nodded his head heavily. Then, let's go. Lin Yu tore through the void and forcibly traveled through time and space. Their speed was extremely fast. Unfortunately, the entire continent was just too big. According to Lin Yu's description and Lu Feng's own judgment, the surface area of the Yellow Springs continent was probably comparable to the surface area of hundreds of battlefields in the outer regions. One had to know that the surface area of the outer regions was already terrifyingly large. It was already ridiculously large. However, in the second universe, the surface area of the Yellow Springs continent, which wasn't considered huge, was actually larger than the total surface area of hundreds of battlefields in the outer regions. This was really a little exaggerated, as expected of a place left behind by the primordial immortal devil era. This kind of place is really too terrifying. Shaking his head gently, Lu Feng accompanied Lu Fenglai to a place, the capital of a country. Lu Feng, we can save a lot of time if we use the transportation formation here. Although we can't teleport directly, it will save us a few thousand times more time than if we teleport by ourselves. Due to the limited level, the distance that could be teleported was very limited. However, this place was different. By relying on the teleportation array here, the distance they could teleport to would increase countless times. Of course, the most important thing was that there was no need to waste any energy using these teleportation arrays. A complicated look flashed across Lin Yu's eyes as he looked at the towering city tower that was over 1,000 feet tall. Lu Feng, this is the capital of the Great Han Empire. Lu Feng nodded his head gently. His eyes were fine, so he could clearly see the words "Heart of the Great Man" on the huge door. In the past, my greatest dream was to enter the capital of the Great Han Dynasty and make some achievements here so that I could bring my parents here and let them enjoy their old age. Lu Feng had a smile in his eyes as he nodded gently. Now that your strength is sufficient, it's time. Lin Yu also smiled gently and said, yes, it's time. I still don't know what will happen this time, so I have to arrange everything in advance. This way, I can leave with peace of mind. In order to let my parents live a good life here, I have to use my power to bully others. Using his power to bully others, Lin Yu was now at the immortal realm, and his true combat strength was comparable to any high-level true immortal. Although he didn't know if such strength was invincible in the Great Han Empire, there was definitely no one who could suppress him. In order to ensure that his parents could live a stable life here after he left, he had to use his power to intimidate the Great Han Emperor. At his current level, Lu Feng naturally saw through everything in the secular world. He was an emperor himself. Back in a Nine Lives fantasy realm, he even used the body of an ant to change history twice. Therefore, Lu Feng didn't feel anything about the so-called secular emperors at all. As for Lin Yu, although most of the time, he was an ordinary person. However, after the transformation, he completely changed. After the transformation, the knowledge and experience in his mind were awakened, and gradually, he also possessed everything that a strong person should have. Although he couldn't completely ignore the secular emperors like Lu Feng, he basically didn't care about it anymore. Then, Lu Feng, let's go directly to the palace. Find the Great Han Emperor and intimidate him a little. Then we can leave this place. Naturally, Lu Feng didn't care. After nodding slightly, he followed Lin Yu's footsteps and walked toward the center of the city. It had to be said that the center of the city was incomparably luxurious. The capital of the Great Han Empire was much, much larger than any city in the original universe that Lu Feng had been to. Of course, compared to the central cities in the foreign battlefields, it was much worse. However, considering that this was only the capital of a third-rate empire, it was already shocking to have such a scale. Walking on the streets of the city and looking at the people coming and going around, Lu Feng felt slightly complicated. At this moment, he thought of his family. In the past, Lu Feng thought that he could stay in the second universe for 12 years at most, and that he could go back in a few decades at most. However, after hearing the words of the human king phantom, Lu Feng realized that he actually needed the strength of an epic overlord to leave this place. This undoubtedly made Lu Feng give up all his thoughts. This made Lu Feng know clearly that he definitely couldn't go back in a short period of time. It was also because of this reason that Lu Feng decided to go with Lin Yu to Lin Lang Tian, the only emperor-level main sect in the Yellow Spring Continent. That was because he knew that only a place like that would allow him to improve faster and bring him one step closer to his home. Lin Yu was slightly taken aback when he saw the complicated expression on Lu Feng's face. He asked, "Lu Feng, what's wrong with you?" In his opinion, Lu Feng was always full of vigor and vitality. He was always fearless in the face of anything. He was always the kind of person who could control the overall situation and see through everything. However, it was obvious that Lin Yu had never seen such a complicated Lu Feng. Upon hearing Lin Yu's words, Lu Feng smiled and waved his hand. "Nothing. I just thought of some relatives." Lin Yu originally wanted to ask where Lu Feng's relatives were. After all, apart from knowing that Lu Feng was an emperor, he didn't know anything else about Lu Feng. However, after seeing Lu Feng's expression, he knew that Lu Feng really didn't want to talk about it. Therefore, Lin Yu didn't continue to ask for more information. When the two of them arrived at the imperial city, it was close to noon. This was obviously the time when the number of people was the highest. The two of them stood quietly in front of the terrifying and huge imperial city gate. Both of them were incomparably calm. Lin Yu closed his eyes and sensed for a moment. A strange color appeared in his eyes. He looked at Lu Feng, and Lu Feng nodded lightly. Your feeling is right. Seeing that Lu Feng was also certain, Lin Yu let out a sigh of relief. His expression was slightly complicated. I really didn't expect the Great Han Empire to have hidden such a trump card. When they arrived, they felt a terrifying aura condensing and rising from the center of the imperial city. Such an aura wasn't something that an empire could emit. That was definitely the aura of an expert. It was the aura of a truly terrifying expert. At the very least, he's a heavenly immortal. I really didn't expect that such a secular empire would have a heavenly immortal overseeing it. I've heard that the strongest existence in the Great Han Empire is the Great Han Empire's Great Protector General. His strength was only at the peak of the 3 stages of tribulation passing. But now, such an existence actually appeared here. Lin Yu was at the immortal level, but once he used all his power, he was comparable to any high-level true immortal. Due to the uniqueness of his body, even a peak true immortal could be clearly felt. However, at this moment, he only felt that extremely terrifying aura. Such an aura had already exceeded the limit of his perception. Therefore, Lin Yu understood that there must be a true heavenly immortal hidden among the princes of the imperial city. If Lu Feng wasn't here, Lin Yu probably wouldn't have much confidence. Seeing Lin Yu's attitude, Lu Feng shook his head lightly. If the few supreme kings in the primal universe encountered such a situation, they would probably have killed their way in. Even if it wasn't a supreme king, it would be the same if the desolate emperor, Wan Yueming, Qi Liang, and the other kings of slaughter encountered such a situation. What is a monster? What is a genius? What is a pride? Our existence is the interpretation of these. Yes, we should ensure our own survival. But if we don't have any impulse and courage, are we still prides? Are we still the younger generation? Are we still the generation of hope for the future? Hearing Lu Feng's words, Lin Yu fell silent. Looking at Lin Yu, Lu Feng continued, I'm not asking you to throw your life away, and I'm not asking you to blindly fight against those who are much stronger than you. You should know that the accumulation of a monster is too terrifying. If you want to progress, you need a huge amount of resources and an unimaginable amount of time. If you want to progress quickly, you need countless collisions. You need strength on the edge of life and death, and struggle in the abyss. Only in this way can you really progress quickly and achieve a shocking breakthrough. This time, you hesitated because you felt that the being in the imperial city was stronger than you. You were no match for him, so you retreated. But Lin Yu, you have to understand that if you were to fight against those ordinary existences, they would all be far weaker than you. If so, is it possible for you to progress through battle? You can feel his aura, which proves that his existence isn't much stronger than yours. Under such circumstances, even if you can't win the battle, you can still escape. Besides, we didn't come here to fight. But you showed hesitation, which proves that you are really afraid of clashing with him. Lin Yu, you don't have the heart of a great being yet. Chapter 833. Lu Feng's words made Lin Yu fall into a daze. There was an indescribable turbulence in his expression. After a long time, Lin Yu slowly lowered his head. Lu Feng did not say anything when he saw Lin Yu in this state. He just watched quietly. Lin Yu was the first friend that Lu Feng met after coming here. Moreover, Lu Feng also saw Lin Yu's character and potential. He had wasted so much time in the past. If this continued, Lin Yu would really lose too much. As a friend, Lu Feng really did not want to see this scene. Therefore, at this moment, he opened his mouth to remind Lu Feng. Just as Lin Yu was deep in thought, a voice suddenly rang out in the void. Well said, really well said. Geniuses wander between life and death, struggling in the midst of depravity. I didn't expect you to see it so clearly and understand it so well. The voice was indifferent, but it was mixed with an indescribable richness of emotions. After hearing this, Lu Feng only smiled gently. You are the true existence of the Great Han Empire, right? Just the strength that you show on the outside is already at the level of a heavenly immortal. I'm afraid that the power of your body is at least at the level of a golden immortal or even higher. Lin Yu was slightly stunned. An indescribable turbulence appeared in his eyes. At this moment, he really did not know what to say at all. If he was shocked when he found out that there was a celestial immortal hidden in the Great Han Empire, then when he found out that this hidden existence was actually a golden immortal, he was stunned and at a loss. You can actually sense my existence? You must know that my body is silent at the bottom of the endless abyss and has been blinded by time and space. You can actually sense it? There was a hint of astonishment in his voice. However, after hearing this, Lu Feng's smile widened. You should be able to sense my cultivation level. Right now, I am only a pseudo-immortal. As a pseudo-immortal, how can I sense your body that is hidden deep underground and blinded by time and space? Everything is just my guess. After Lu Feng entered the pinnacle domain, he could use the Sacred Clan's birth chart cultivation method to conceal his true situation at any time. Therefore, in the Star World, Golden Immortal Lianting and even the Hunyuan Golden Immortal guarding him couldn't see his situation. During normal times, Lu Feng didn't hide his strength at all. He would show how much strength he had. The strength that he usually displayed was only at the Void Immortal Realm. Although he was at the peak of the Void Immortal Realm, in the eyes of the true experts, he was still at the peak of the Void Immortal Realm. They had not even stepped into the Immortal Realm, so they were really nothing. Lu Feng's words made the terrifying guardian of the Great Han Empire fall into deep thought. After a long while, he slowly asked, "You guessed it? How can I guess?" Lu Feng smiled confidently. "I think your existence shouldn't be a secret to the upper immortal sections. Moreover, you are definitely not from the upper immortal sections. They even went to the upper immortal sects to recruit you, but you rejected them. However, you should have also indicated that you would never go against the upper immortal sects." Vaguely, there was a slight vibration in the void. This kind of fluctuation was impossible for ordinary people to feel at all. Perhaps only monsters like Lu Feng and Lin Yu could really feel it. At this moment, Lin Yu knew that Lu Feng was right. He might even be right. Otherwise, how could such a powerful existence have such a fluctuation? In the next moment, in the Imperial City, the wind and clouds suddenly changed, the heaven and earth shook, and the sun and moon bowed. A loud voice came from the depths of the Imperial City. "Greetings, Patriarch! Greetings, Patriarch! Greetings, Patriarch!" The voice rose and fell, constantly resounding in the heavens and earth. It was as if there would never be an end. Finally, amidst the endless calls, a figure slowly walked out. It was a terrifying but incomparably indifferent figure. His existence was so ordinary, but under this ordinariness, it attracted the ultimate power of heaven and earth. If Lu Feng did not say it, then perhaps Lin Yu would really think that he was a celestial immortal. However, now he understood that the existence that appeared might be a celestial immortal, but the true body hidden under the Imperial City was a real golden immortal. It was even an almost invincible existence, like a golden immortal. The last step stopped quietly and arrived in front of Lu Feng and Lin Yu. At this moment, Lin Yu could finally see the final appearance of the guardian of the Great Han Empire. This was a middle-aged powerhouse with a plain appearance. There was nothing outstanding about his face, but if one looked at him as a whole, he gave off an indescribable deep impression. His existence was clearly not outstanding, but it was so eye-catching that it was unforgettable and must be engraved in the depths of one's heart. The three of them looked at each other. Of course, in reality, the two of them looked at each other. After all, Lin Yu was not Lu Feng. He smiled lightly and waved his arm. Three luxurious chairs suddenly appeared in the void. Two of them appeared behind Lu Feng and Lin Yu. "Have a seat." Forming an object from the void was a real object, a real object. This indeed proved that Lu Feng's previous statement was not wrong. He was indeed a golden immortal powerhouse, because in order to achieve the level of condensing an object from a void, he must have condensed an existence of a world. And condensing a world meant that he had already become a golden immortal powerhouse. Looking at the chair behind him, Lu Feng did not hesitate and directly sat down. Seeing Lu Feng's action, Lin Yu was slightly taken aback and sat down as well. At this moment, the three of them sat down completely, looking at each other. Except for Lin Yu's confused eyes, Lu Feng and the guardian of the Great Han Empire had an incomparably mysterious color. How would you guess? I believe that you have not specially studied me before. Lu Feng nodded. Indeed, I have not specially studied you before. Moreover, I did not understand the things that I saw before. But now, when I sensed your presence, I guessed. Slightly raising his eyebrows, the guardian revealed a slightly interested expression at this moment. Lu Feng came here with Lin Yu this time. Their goal wasn't to force the Great Han Empire's imperial family to submit to them. They only wanted to create a good environment that could intimidate the existence here and allow the existence of the Great Han Empire to take good care of Lin Yu's parents after they left. Of course, the degree of intimidation had to be sufficient because Lin Yu didn't know what kind of danger would happen in the future. If he couldn't effectively intimidate them, then not long after he left, who knew how these people would treat the two ordinary people? It was just that they did not expect such a terrifying existence to be hidden in the Great Han Empire's capital. Obviously, they could not rely on martial strength to deal with such an existence. Moreover, if they could build a good relationship with such an existence, it would save them a lot of trouble. After all, it was much better to have such an existence to help take care of them than to forcefully deter them after they left. Therefore, Lu Feng also gave up his previous tough attitude. Although his tone was not respectful, it did not have a majestic feeling from before. You should know that there is a branch of a high immortal sect in the Great Han Empire. The guardian nodded gently, and a strange look flashed in his eyes. Lu Feng smiled gently and continued. The level of that branch is extremely high. It almost has the power of a 9th grade artifact. According to the disciples of the high immortal sects, that branch should be placed in a country like the Star Empire. A country like the Great Han Empire. Lu Feng didn't continue because they all understood. The Star Empire was one of the 4 great empires in the entire Qingyuan province. It represented the top empire in the entire Yellow Spring continent. As for the Great Han Empire, it was more than 1 level lower than the Star Empire. So even if Lu Feng did not say it, these people could understand the meaning of his words. Sure enough, the next moment, the guardian nodded gently and did not show any displeasure. After Lu Feng glanced at him, he continued, "But it is obviously unreasonable for such a level of branch to be placed here. And the most unreasonable thing is that there are only a few disciples of the high immortal sects above the branch. Of course, a 3rd level disciple is not bad. But he is only a 3rd grade disciple, and his status is really not worthy of such a branch school." Then when the high immortal sects planned to send those disciples to the headquarters, I found out that the teleportation array here was really too terrifying. It was normal for there to be a teleportation array in the branch that directly led to the main sect. But the teleportation array that appeared in the branch was too exaggerated. It was not used to teleport disciples at all. It gave Lu Feng a feeling that the existence of this teleportation array seemed to be specially prepared to teleport some terrifying experts. Sure enough, after he took control of the branch, Lu Feng also understood that the teleportation array was actually specially built later. Previously, there was no teleportation array in the branch. This point made Lu Feng puzzled. At that time, Lu Feng also thought that the teleportation array and the branch might be used to deal with some kind of existence. However, if it was really aimed at someone, then it shouldn't just let a few disciples with no strength to participate in this competition. This made Lu Feng puzzled. Today, when he came here and felt the aura of the existence here, Lu Feng completely understood. The branch was placed here in the hope that if there is any problem, it can come at any time. But obviously, the high immortal sects are just guarding against you. To them, you're only a threat but not an enemy. That's why they're doing this. Of course, if it is just an ordinary heavenly immortal, or even a golden immortal, then I am afraid that the High Immortal sect will not do this. After all, it is not a big deal for such an existence to really make trouble, so they can just kill it casually. Or they will forcefully recruit and directly obliterate if they fail to recruit. But they did not do that. Instead, they placed a top branch here. This is enough to explain. Hearing these explanations, a strange look flashed in the eyes of the guardian of the Great Han Empire, and he nodded gently. This is enough to explain. My existence is enough to cause a very terrifying destruction to the High Immortal sects, and my existence is not something that can be easily killed by the High Immortal sections. So, they have to guard against me, but they don't want to offend me too much. Placing a branch here is just to express their intention. I said it, right? Lu Feng smiled and nodded. To be able to correspond with a branch of this level, it can only mean that your strength is very strong, and you are definitely not an ordinary heavenly immortal or golden immortal. You are either a monstrous golden immortal or a heaven-defying heavenly immortal. Or you are a great golden immortal or even Hunyuan golden immortal. Chapter 834. Lu Feng's words made that existence fall silent for a moment. A moment later, a smile appeared on his face. Your mind is indeed impressive. You can actually analyze such a situation through some questions that aren't really questions. I wonder which Emperor-level monster you are. This guardian could clearly feel the terrifying power fluctuations in Lu Feng's body. This was a power that made his clone feel frightened and even slightly frightened. Therefore, he dared to be certain that Lu Feng was definitely not a simple monster. Now, after hearing Lu Feng's detailed analysis, he was even more certain that Lu Feng's existence was most likely an Emperor-level monster. Lu Feng was silent for a moment. After a moment, he gently shook his head. I don't belong to any sect, nor am I what you think I am. That existence was slightly stunned. An incomprehensible light flashed in his eyes. A moment later, this light gradually disappeared, and he once again returned to his calm state. He gently nodded and slowly said, Since that's the case, I won't force anything. I just don't know why you're here. You should know that although the Great Han royal family is not related to me by blood, they have helped me a lot. Therefore, I have to take care of them. These words were very clear. That was, the people here were all people that he had to protect. If you want to do anything, then I will absolutely not tolerate it. In fact, this existence couldn't be blamed for having such thoughts. After all, although this was the most central region of the entire Great Han Empire, it was the place where everything in the Great Han Empire gathered. However, the Great Han Empire itself was simply too small. There was simply no divine item or sacred cultivation ground that could move the hearts of experts. It could be said that in the eyes of many experts, the Great Han Empire was actually a barren land. Therefore, today, when Lu Feng and Lin Yu, these two monstrous existences who were already considered immortals and pseudo-immortals, came here, he really couldn't ignore them. He couldn't help but think about some things. Hearing this, Lu Feng gently smiled and glanced at Lin Yu beside him. In Lu Feng's opinion, it was better to leave this explanation to Lin Yu. After all, this was Lin Yu's matter. If he had to say all this, it would appear that he was too domineering. Lin Yu didn't hesitate and directly told him about his matter. After hearing everything, that existence's expression relaxed. Just taking care of two people wasn't a big deal at all. Most importantly, taking care of two people could make a top genius like Lin Yu or Lu Feng owe him a favor. It was really worth it. Therefore, he directly agreed without any hesitation. Originally, Lu Feng had planned to tear open the void and bring his parents over with Lin Yu before leaving this place. However, that existence didn't seem to want to let the two people's tea leave. He set up a banquet in the palace and tried his best to invite the two of them. As for Lin Yu's parents, there would naturally be people specially sent to receive them. Thinking that his parents would still rely on this expert to take care of them in the future, Lin Yu naturally didn't want to offend him. However, he still looked at Lu Feng because he knew that Lu Feng's attitude was the deciding factor. Lu Feng looked at that existence, smiled slightly, and nodded gently. In that case, thank you for your hospitality, Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon. Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon was the name of this guardian of the Great Han Empire. Just as Lu Feng had expected, he was indeed in existence at the level of a Golden Immortal. However, he was a true monster-level Golden Immortal, a king-level Golden Immortal. A king-level Golden Immortal was definitely an extremely terrifying existence. Under the limit of power, he was equivalent to a true primordial chaos Golden Immortal. If it wasn't for this, how could the top 5 immortal sects of the Yellow Springs continent pay so much attention to it? The location of the banquet was in the hall of the palace. In this place, other than Lu Feng's group of 3, there were only a few attendants. Even the emperor of the Great Han Empire wasn't qualified to enter this place. After all, whether it was Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon, Lu Feng, or Lin Yu, they were all geniuses and monsters. Their own strength had reached a terrifying level. Only existences of the same level could be with them. As for the others, Lu Feng and Lin Yu might not mind, but Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon cared very much. According to him, this was the identity of an expert. Looking at the luxurious decorations and exquisite food, Lu Feng didn't have much interest. At this moment, he just sat quietly in his seat. In fact, these things didn't matter to them. After all, not to mention immortals, even existences at the 3 levels of Exuvia had already gotten rid of the need for food. And when they reached the immortal realm, even the environment couldn't restrict them in the slightest. Therefore, when they came here, all they cared about was their face. Waving his arm, he motioned for the servants to leave. Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon looked at Lu Feng quietly. After a long time, he smiled slightly. I thought that you wouldn't accept my invitation to enter this place. After all, my true body, the true body of a Golden Immortal, is sleeping below. Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon's words were very clear. He thought that Lu Feng wouldn't choose to come here because of his caution. After all, once his true body recovered here, it would be completed in a very short period of time. At that time, Lu Feng and the others would definitely be in danger. Ordinary cultivators wouldn't put themselves in a dangerous situation. Hearing this, Lu Feng smiled lightly. I've already said before that as a monster and a genius, if you want to improve quickly, you must walk on the edge of life and death and wander in the abyss of depravity. This is the path of true power. This is where the true hope of success lies. If there's fear in your heart, then you will never succeed. After a moment of silence, Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon nodded gently. He looked at Lu Feng with an indescribable look of scrutiny. But why do I feel that you don't seem to care about this at all? You don't seem to care about my existence at all. Even if you know that my true body is sleeping below, the true body with the power of a Golden Immortal power, you still don't have to worry. Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon saw Lu Feng very clearly. He could clearly see that Lu Feng didn't care about him at all. He also didn't care about his true body at all. Although he didn't know what Lu Feng's trump card was, Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon was sure that no matter how strong Lu Feng was, it was impossible for him to fight against his true body with the power of a Golden Immortal at the Void Immortal realm. Even if he had an unparalleled immortal weapon used by an immortal king, it was still impossible. However, Lu Feng's performance at this moment was too indifferent. It was as if he completely ignored any feelings. He definitely had a trump card so powerful that he could completely disregard him. This was how Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon felt. Lu Feng smiled faintly, feeling the same confusion in Lin Yu's eyes. He just shook his head gently. I do have a trump card, a very powerful one. Therefore, I ignore everything. Lu Feng's explanation was so simple, without the slightest complication. However, it was basically the same as not having a trump card. Both of them were puzzled, completely puzzled. Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon, you can rest assured that I have no ill intentions towards you. I came here because of some special circumstances, and I definitely won't stay here for too long. So you can rest assured and continue to stay here in peace. Recuperate. At this moment, Lin, you could clearly feel the extremely terrifying vibration coming from Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon's clone. It was an indescribable feeling of terror that made the bottom of one's heart tremble. Lin Yu's expression was extremely unpleasant, but he did not say anything, as he really could not say anything at this moment. This was the majesty of a celestial being. Of course, if it was only the majesty of a celestial being, Lin Yu would not find it so difficult to resist. After all, he was an Emperor monster. He had fused with so much knowledge and memory. After experiencing that kind of painful torture, his will was already very terrifying. This time, the biggest reason why he was suppressed by the majesty was that this aura was not purely the majesty of a celestial immortal. Mixed in it was the terrifying power of a golden immortal that belonged to the true body of Imperial Dragon, Golden Immortal. It was the main reason why he was completely suppressed. However, Lu Feng did not seem to be affected by the terrifying aura. He was still as indifferent as before. He did not even feel the slightest disturbance in his surroundings. It was unbelievable that he was so calm. It was so quiet that it was unbelievable. Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon's eyes flickered with an indescribable emotion. He looked at Lu Feng for a long time before he finally spoke slowly. "You. Who are you?" 5 simple words, but they already carried a terrifying majesty. Vaguely, in the depths of the underground, there was an indescribable violent tremor that was slowly appearing, and it was slowly recovering. Lin Yu knew, and so did Lu Feng. In the depths of the ground, it was the power of a golden immortal. It belonged to Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon's body, the power of a great golden immortal. He was actually recovering. However, in the face of all this, Lu Feng was still indifferent. At such a moment, he actually smiled. "I said, I don't have any ill intentions. You don't have to do this. I don't want to cause trouble. But if I really do, I won't hold back. Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon, I can tell you very clearly. Once I use my trump card, you won't be a match for me." At this moment, Lu Feng stood up. Although there was no appearance of power, the terrifying will of soul made people's hearts tremble. This was Lu Feng. Although he didn't use any power, just his will alone was still a terrifying existence that terrified countless people. At this moment, although Lu Feng was powerful, he didn't have the terrifying strength that was completely invincible. This had nothing to do with what he had just said. However, for some reason, when they saw Lu Feng like this, both Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon and Lin Yu believed him. They believed in Lu Feng's words. They believed in Lu Feng's words that he could kill a king-level great golden immortal under the condition of paying a price. Strong, Lu Feng was very strong. He had no intention of backing down. Looking at Lu Feng, Lin Yu, who was suppressed, also revealed a slightly confused expression. During the time he had been in contact with Lu Feng, he could tell that Lu Feng was a person. It could be said that although Lu Feng had shocking talent and invincible strength that could crush mid-level celestial immortals, he had always been an extremely humble existence. But today, Lin Yu could feel that Lu Feng was obviously very strong when facing Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon. It could even be said that he was very domineering, as if he wanted to suppress him in all aspects. In fact, Lu Feng had his reasons for doing this. This was because he could feel an obvious hostility from Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon. Although it was hidden very well, this hostility and malice could not be hidden from Lu Feng. It was also because of this reason that when facing him, Lu Feng was always incomparably strong and did not retreat at all. After a long time, the two of them confronted each other. It was a long time. Finally, the majesty around Golden Immortal Imperial Dragon gradually disappeared and completely dissipated. An indescribable color appeared on his face. "How did you know?" Chapter 835. Lu Feng chuckled. His expression was indifferent and filled with certainty. At this moment, it was as if everything was under his control. There was no doubt that Imperial Dragon Golden Immortal was extremely fearful of Lu Feng because he could feel that Lu Feng wasn't faking it. This undoubtedly proved that Lu Feng really had the power to control the overall situation, or it could be said that he had a trump card. There are many existences who choose to cultivate with their main body and rely on their clones to travel the world. However, such existences have a common characteristic, and that is the place where their main body cultivates is definitely some holy land for cultivation. Either those places are rich in nomological laws, or those places are rich in mysteries. But here, what is there here? Lu Feng's words were very clear. Although this was the capital of the Great Han Empire, there was nothing here at all. There is not much difference between cultivating with his main body here and cultivating anywhere else. With the power of Imperial Dragon Golden Immortal's main body that was comparable to a Hunyuan Golden Immortal, he could totally find a holy land for cultivation. But in the end, he let his main body sleep here. As a result, Lu Feng saw a lot of problems. Of course, there was another reason, and that was that Lu Feng had already felt it. He had already felt a faint sense of loss in Imperial Dragon Golden Immortal's sleeping body. Of course, it was only Lu Feng. If it were anyone else, it would be impossible for them to feel it. After all, it was impossible for them to shatter the forbidden domain and enter the Divine King's realm to fight for a period of time like Lu Feng. Imperial Dragon Golden Immortal. I've said before that my trump card is not something you can imagine. So, don't think about other things. If it really comes to that, then the one who dies in the end, I'm sure that you'll be the one. Moreover, it will only be you alone. Lu Feng's eyes were filled with an indescribable coldness at this moment. His voice was also endlessly cold, making people's hearts tremble. The moment he met Lu Feng's gaze, Imperial Dragon Golden Immortal narrowed his eyes slightly. But in the next moment he smiled. At this moment, the tense atmosphere from before had completely disappeared. There was no trace of it at all. Since it mean no harm, then I wouldn't have to worry so much. I was too careful just now. After all, I'm currently in a state of recovery. It's unavoidable for me to feel nervous when I suddenly hear you mention my injuries. Lin Yu nodded gently. This was indeed the case. A smile reappeared on his face. However, he did not notice the icy coldness hidden under the same smile on Lu Feng's face. There were many experts in the Great Han Empire. Moreover, teleportation circles were very widespread in the second universe. Almost every small city had a few teleportation circles. Although the city where Lin Yu's parents lived might not have it. However, relying on the speed of the powerful martial artists of the Great Han Empire, they quickly found Lin Yu's parents. On the second day, Lin Yu's parents were brought over to the Great Han Empire's capital. The next day, Lin Yu spent the entire day with his parents. Although they were not Lin Yu's biological parents, they had an indelible debt of gratitude for raising Lin Yu. In fact, in Lin Yu's heart, the two of them were even more important than Lin Longtian's parents in the Lin family. Standing high in the sky, Lu Feng looked down at Lin Yu, who was happily chatting with his parents. A hint of emotion flashed through his heart. At this moment, Lu Feng really thought of his parents and everything they had done for him. If you miss home, then go back. A voice rang in his ears. Lu Feng did not turn around. He already knew who was coming. His expression was unreadable. In the end, he only smiled and shook his head gently. Now is not the time. I'm not strong enough. I'm not qualified to go back. I still need time. His voice gradually lowered. However, an indescribable shock flashed through Lu Feng's eyes. That was a kind of persistence that surpassed everything. The voice seemed to have sensed Lu Feng's persistence. After a moment of silence, it finally spoke again. I'm really curious about who you are. In the past, some old bastards from the immortal sects had asked me if I knew what kind of existence had seized their sex. Now it seems that it was you. It's you guys, or maybe you did it. In the beginning, Golden Immortal Yulong had suspected whether this matter had something to do with Lu Feng. Of course, this thought only appeared in his mind when they first met. However, it disappeared later on. This was because he could feel the cautious mentality of the elders of the upper immortal sect. Naturally, he knew that for those gold immortals to be so cautious, the person who made the move was definitely extremely terrifying. And the two people in front of him didn't seem to have such strength. However, at the banquet yesterday, After Lu Feng said those words, Golden Immortal Yulong believed it, and even firmly believed it. He firmly believed that all the changes and losses in the upper immortal sect might be caused by this young man. Although it was a bit unbelievable, he didn't know why, but he believed in this conclusion. He firmly believed it. Looking at Lu Feng, he wanted to find some clues from Lu Feng's expression. It was a pity that Lu Feng's expression had returned to its usual indifference. It was a completely indifferent color. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't see it at all. After a long time, Lu Feng finally smiled slowly. Yes, everything in the upper immortal sect was done by me. And their subsect is now in my hands, becoming one of my gains. Slightly gasping, at this moment, Golden Immortal Yulong really didn't need to hide the fear in his eyes. Although he had guessed it at this moment, when Lu Feng really said it, he was still shocked, completely shocked. But soon, the shock disappeared, replaced by a helpless smile, a slight bitter smile. Aren't you afraid that I will tell the upper immortal sect everything? You know, I have no relationship with you. And if I tell the upper immortal sect, I can still get a lot of benefits. Hearing this, Lu Feng finally turned around. On his face, there was a smile, still a smile, an incomparably indifferent smile. Everything is up to you. It was a very simple sentence without any other meaning. It was as if this was a very ordinary thing. Looking at Lu Feng's indifferent expression, a thought flashed in Golden Immortal Yulong's mind. It was a thought that made him incomparably shocked. The degree of this shock was really indescribable. For a moment, he unconsciously asked, "Don't tell me that you don't even put the upper immortal sect, the #1 sect in Qingyuan Prefecture, in the top 5 emperor sects in the Yellow Spring continent, in your eyes?" This was the only thought in Golden Immortal Yulong's mind at this moment. He understood that there were only 2 possibilities for Lu Feng to dare to say these words. First, Lu Feng was an idiot. However, no one would believe the first possibility. If Lu Feng was an idiot, Golden Immortal Yulong would never believe it. Since it was not the first possibility, it could only be the second one. And the second possibility was that Lu Feng's existence could no longer be ignored. It could even be said that he ignored the existence of the upper immortal sect. He believed that Lu Feng must have enough confidence in his heart to say these words. Looking at the shocked expression on Golden Immortal Yulong's face, Lu Feng just smiled softly. There are no absolutes in everything. After all, it is an emperor sect with a flowing time immortal venerable. After saying this, Lu Feng turned around and disappeared above the void. Golden Immortal Yulong was completely stunned as he watched Lu Feng's disappearing figure. Although he did not give a definite answer, the meaning behind it was very clear. There are no absolutes in everything. The corner of his mouth curved into a slightly bitter smile. You are really confident the upper immortal sect had a flowing time overlord. When Lu Feng mentioned the flowing time immortal venerable, it proved that to him, only the flowing time immortal venerable was worthy of his attention in the upper immortal sect. This undoubtedly meant that in Lu Feng's eyes, apart from the flowing time immortal venerable, nothing else was a problem. Golden Immortal Yulong sighed softly. He was completely speechless at this moment. It seems like it's all thanks to my caution this time. Shaking his head gently, Golden Immortal Yulong's figure also completely disappeared above the void. On the 3rd day, Lu Feng and Lin Yu finally set off. It could be said that Lin Yu had completely let go of the last worry in his heart. At this moment, he no longer had any worries. This time, they left via a teleportation array. The teleportation array they took was specially used by the Great Han Empire's imperial family. Golden Immortal Yulong had arranged all of this. Lin Yu did not understand why Golden Immortal Yulong would treat them like this. He still clearly remembered the kind smile on Golden Immortal Yulong's face when they parted. It was not the expression of a senior looking down on a junior. It was really an extremely simple and equal smile. He had treated Lu Feng as an equal. Finally, with a flash of light and a feeling of the world being replaced, the two of them appeared in a brand new city in the next moment. Lu Feng, this should be Fufeng City. It's the largest city in the Imperial Azure Dynasty's frontier fortress. Lu Feng nodded gently. He knew that Lin Yu, who had obtained so much knowledge, would have a much better understanding of these places than he did. Therefore, Lin Yu was the guide this time. Chapter 836. The teleportation array used by the royal family of the Great Han Empire is indeed terrifying. Who would have thought that this teleportation would have traversed over 100 empires and traversed almost a third of the Qingyuan prefecture? A tenth of the journey to the Qingyuan prefecture was definitely a terrifying distance. After a little calculation, Lu Feng found that the time it took for them to teleport here was close to a day's time. To be honest, this speed was not much faster than Lu Feng's simple tearing through the void. To others, tearing through the void would require a huge amount of energy. However, to Lu Fenglai, who had almost unlimited energy, this bit of energy consumption was nothing. However, all of this was done while he was tearing through the void. If you were to bring Lin Yu along, the speed would be greatly reduced. Lin Yu, since the teleportation arrays in the main cities are so convenient, let's choose the teleportation array in the royal capital. Lin Yu nodded his head lightly after hearing Lu Feng's words. If they were to rely on those small teleportation arrays to teleport all the way from the Great Han Empire, they would have to go through at least 100 stations to reach their destination. How would it be like just now, where they could teleport directly to the capital? All right, since that's the case, let's head directly to the capital of the Imperial Azure Empire and use the teleportation array of the royal family. The speed will definitely be faster. Since they had decided, the two of them did not hesitate any longer. After asking for directions, they took the teleportation array here and teleported to the imperial capital of the Imperial Azure Empire. To others, using the royal family's teleportation array was completely impossible. After all, the royal family's teleportation array was something that even the princes could not use casually. However, to these two, it was not a problem at all. They had never considered these things before. Soon, after a few teleportations, the two of them arrived at the imperial capital of the Imperial Azure Empire. Feeling the prosperity of the surroundings, the two of them sighed in admiration. This is the imperial capital of the Imperial Azure Empire. Compared to the Great Han Empire's capital, the degree of prosperity here is more than 10 times greater. Lin Yu nodded his head lightly. This is how it should be. The Great Han Empire is only a third-grade empire. However, the Light Wind Empire is a true first-grade empire. In the Great Han Empire, the strongest person on the surface should be the State Protector General. His strength was at most in the Tribulation Realm. But in this Imperial Green Cloud Empire, I'm afraid those generals who can enter the Imperial Court are at least at the false Immortal Realm. And I've heard that the strongest expert on the surface has already reached the true Immortal Realm. Hearing this, Lu Feng nodded slightly, but a strange look flashed across his face. This Green Cloud Imperial Empire is truly powerful. To be able to use a true immortal as the Grand General of the Imperial Protector, this was sufficient to show how terrifying the Green Cloud Imperial Empire was. Lu Feng believed that within the inner regions of the Green Cloud Imperial Empire, there was a high possibility that there were heavenly immortals. In the original universe, sky immortals were equivalent to sky gods, and they were known as extreme great beings in a pinnacle overlord race. Their status in their race was incomparably noble. It could be said that he was definitely the overlord of the galaxy. But here, in a first-rate empire, there could be such an existence. This was enough to prove the valiant strength and shocking foundation of the second universe. Looking at Lu Feng, Lin Yu chuckled lightly. If it was me, I'm afraid I would have obediently teleported over and wouldn't dare to covet the teleportation array of the Imperial Green Cloud Imperial Empire. After all, if there was really a heavenly immortal hidden within the imperial capital of the Imperial Green Cloud Imperial Empire, and he didn't give me face, then I would be embarrassed. But fortunately, you're here. With you around, there won't be any problems, Lin Yu had personally witnessed how Lu Feng used his power to easily suppress an upper immortal sect disciple who had transformed into a water chestnut. One must know that after transforming into a water chestnut, the power of that half-step true immortal disciple had definitely reached the level of a heavenly immortal. And such a powerful existence was easily suppressed by Lu Feng. This was enough to prove how terrifying Lu Feng was. All right, let's go in. Don't waste too much time here. Lu Feng's biggest goal now was to achieve a breakthrough and become stronger quickly. Obviously, in this world, even though the average place was much stronger than the original universe. But for an existence at his level to achieve a breakthrough, it wasn't very possible. In fact, there was almost no chance at all. After all, Lu Feng's existence was already extremely terrifying. Ordinary battles wouldn't have any effect at all. Therefore, Lu Feng had placed his hopes on Lin Langtian, the #1 sect of the Yellow Spring Continent. Hearing Lu Feng's urging, Lin Yu nodded his head lightly. Both of them headed towards the direction of the imperial city of the Imperial Green Cloud Imperial Empire. Finally, when both of them arrived at the smaller part of the imperial city, there was a slight change in their expressions. Looking at Lu Feng, Lin Yu smiled slowly and said, "Indeed, the Imperial Green Cloud Imperial Empire is very well hidden." Lu Feng smiled back and nodded his head. Heavenly Immortals are existences that have just entered the realm of Heavenly Immortals. I guess they are the previous generation's National Protector General of the Imperial Green Cloud Imperial Empire. In an empire, the strongest person was the National Protector General. There was no exception to this. Judging from the aura of a Heavenly Immortal here, it should be at least the previous generation's National Protector General. Of course, this was just their guess. A mid-tier Heavenly Immortal is definitely an extremely terrifying existence. But in front of you, it's still not enough. Lu Feng looked at Lin Yu and said slowly, "Just release your aura. Release your immortal aura. I believe that with your immortal aura, the other party will give you some face." Under such circumstances, Lu Feng definitely wouldn't make a move. After all, the other party was only a mid-tier Heavenly Immortal. Lin Yu was aware of Lu Feng's plan. He knew that Lu Feng wanted to use his status to get the other party to give him face and allow him to use the teleportation array. Even though he couldn't be compared to Lu Feng, Lin Yu's status was still very high. After all, he was an immortal and an emperor-level immortal at that. This was something that no one in the Imperial Green Cloud Imperial Empire could compare to. Gradually, he released his power of Heavenly Immortal, which easily affected the order of heaven and earth. One had to admit that immortals were also the power of gods. It was truly terrifying. Too terrifying. The reason why they were called immortals and gods was because they could change the order of heaven and earth with a wave of their hands. They could do things that no one else could. This was the meaning of gods. This was the definition of immortals. Therefore, when Lin Yu released his power of Heavenly Immortal, dozens of violent auras suddenly appeared in the depths of the Imperial City. These were the auras of true experts. They were all terrifying experts. Any one of them was at the level of immortals. Clearly, they were all alarmed by Lin Yu's aura. In the next moment, more than 30 figures flew out from the depths of the Imperial City. They floated quietly in midair. Their faces were filled with indifference and curiosity. Of course, there weren't any hostile expressions among these people. The aura that Lin Yu released earlier was just a form of prestige. It wasn't destructive at all. It could be said that most people would release such an aura purely to inform others that they were here. This was a friendly gesture. There was no other meaning behind it. Usually, when someone used such an aura to wake others up, it was a sign of goodwill. It was also because of this reason. Those existences that were at the level of immortals that walked out from the depths of the Imperial City had strange expressions on their faces. However, none of them were hostile. Just like that, 30 figures floated quietly in front of Lu Feng and Lin Yu. Looking at these people, Lin Yu heaved a sigh of relief, because he discovered that these people were really strong, extremely strong. Among them, there were 25 immortals. As for the other 5, They were all at the level of true immortals. True immortals. In the legends of the outside world, the Imperial Protector General of the Imperial Green Cloud Imperial Empire was at the level of true immortals. But who would have thought that there were actually 5 true immortals here? This undoubtedly showed how terrifyingly strong the Imperial Green Cloud Imperial Empire was. Looking at Lin Yu, the high-level true immortal standing at the front spoke. I am the Imperial Protector General of the Imperial Green Cloud Imperial Empire. May I know if there's anything that the esteemed expert needs help with? The Imperial Protector General of the Imperial Green Cloud Imperial Empire. This person was the #1 expert of the Imperial Green Cloud Imperial Empire. Actually, according to their ranks, this Imperial Protector General shouldn't be so concerned about Lin Yu. After all, Lin Yu was just an immortal. In the eyes of those experts, he wasn't considered anything. He was a true immortal, a high-level true immortal. With his strength, even the most powerful immortals wouldn't be a threat to him. But he was really so polite. In fact, there was even a faint sense of equality. This caused the other experts of the Imperial Green Cloud Imperial Empire to feel strange. Of course, these people's levels were very low. Naturally, they wouldn't understand the inner thoughts of the Imperial Protector General. They wouldn't understand the complicated emotions in the Imperial Protector General's heart at this moment. He was different from these people. As the Imperial Protector General, he was the strongest expert of the Imperial Green Cloud Imperial Empire. And because of his unique characteristics, he had a certain level of perception towards many things. Just earlier, he had already sensed the sharpness of Lin Yu's aura. That was a true, peerless sharpness. There was a terrifying will within. Generally speaking, such existences were all monstrous geniuses. Monstrous geniuses that could shock the heavens. Their battle prowess could not be measured by their level on the surface. Moreover, the thing that the Imperial Protector General feared the most was the existence behind these monstrous geniuses. Even an idiot would know that if one didn't have a powerful background behind them, then these so-called geniuses would forever remain as geniuses. They would never be able to reach the grand completion stage. Therefore, a monstrous genius would usually represent a large number of people. They would represent countless experts. No power would want to offend these monstrous geniuses. The rules of the Imperial Green Cloud Imperial Empire were extremely strict. Before the Imperial Protector General said anything, they also didn't have the qualifications to say anything. Therefore, these people really waited. They only watched but didn't say a single word. Chapter 837. Looking at the Imperial Protector General of the Imperial Azure Empire, Lin Yu smiled faintly. Moments later, he slowly opened his mouth and said, "Actually, the reason why I came here is because I hope to borrow the teleportation array of your empire. It would allow us to leave this place and head to other prefectures." Using the Imperial teleportation array of the Great Han Empire, they had teleported almost 1/3 of the entire Qingyuan prefecture. If it was the stronger Imperial Azure Empire, they would be able to teleport out of the Qingyuan prefecture directly. Hearing this request, the Imperial Protector General suddenly fell silent and didn't say a word. Behind him, those people were the same. Everyone was silent, completely silent. Seeing this scene, Lu Feng's eyes flashed with a trace of doubt. If it was just a teleportation array, it shouldn't be like this. After all, even though this was the Imperial teleportation array, it was still a teleportation array. At most, it would consume some energy and shouldn't cause any damage. Using this opportunity to waste some energy in exchange for a favorable impression from a monstrous genius was worth it. No matter what, it was incomparably worth it. However, they actually had such expressions on their faces. This caused Lu Feng to be really puzzled. What's wrong? Is there a problem? This was related to whether he could return home quickly, so Lin Yu was exceptionally concerned about it. Hearing this, the Imperial Protector General no longer remained silent. Instead, he revealed an extremely helpless expression. "You guys came at the wrong time. Right now, our teleportation array is in use. For the time being, We won't be able to let you use it. Lu Feng's eyes flashed with a trace of doubt. Similarly, Lin Yu was the same. Both of them looked at each other in confusion. They both felt that the situation was strange. This time, it was Lu Feng who asked, "You guys are in use? Could it be that you guys are using some kind of large-scale teleportation array?" Usually, teleportation arrays would only take an instant to teleport people. But according to what they said, this teleportation array would take a very long time. This caused both of them to be really puzzled. Of course, they didn't think that the Imperial Protector was trying to trick them, because they didn't need to. After all, even if they wanted to find a reason, they wouldn't use such an outrageous reason. Seeing the confusion in their eyes, the National Protector General fell silent. The bitter smile on his face became even more obvious. After taking a look, he said, "If the two of you are not in a hurry, please come into the palace. I will tell you everything." The two of them were in a hurry, but it didn't make much of a difference. Most importantly, they were really interested in these things. Therefore, they were willing to waste some time to listen to the story and see what the truth was. Seeing that the two of them had agreed, the Imperial Protector General of the Green Cloud Imperial Empire turned around and gave up his seat. In an instant, Lu Feng and Lin Yu disappeared under the guidance of the National Protector General. Staring at their departing backs, an immortal from the Green Cloud Imperial Empire had a look of bewilderment on his face. Why is the National Protector General showing such an attitude this time? Even I can tell that those two are only a hollow immortal and an immortal. They shouldn't be worthy of such courtesy from the National Protector General, right? Hearing this, a true immortal beside him smiled faintly. He also looked in the direction where the two of them left and said slowly, "This is what you don't understand. Those two are indeed only at the hollow immortal and immortal stage. In the eyes of an expert, their cultivation level is really ordinary. In fact, they could even be considered weak. However, their strength can't be measured by their cultivation level. I can faintly sense that the immortal who spoke earlier is at least a king stage immortal." These words caused everyone present to deeply inhale a breath of air. Their faces were filled with shock and disbelief. They looked at each other and saw the same look of disbelief in each other's eyes. A king stage immortal. He is actually such a terrifying monster. The true immortal who spoke nodded his head. A trace of shock flashed across his eyes. That's right, a king stage immortal. In fact, he is at least a king stage immortal. A king stage immortal was definitely a high and mighty existence in these empires. Other than the princes groomed by the four great empires, there are no king stage immortals in the other empires. Any monstrous genius at the king realm represents a terrifying force. I think the National Protector General must have seen all these, and that's why he is so polite. The few of them fell silent. They weren't idiots. They could understand these things with just a little explanation. Slowly, they nodded their heads and looked at Lu Feng's back as he left. Compared to the Great Han Empire, the Imperial Palace of the Royal Azure Empire was obviously more luxurious. In the Imperial Palace of the Great Han Empire, it was incomparably luxurious and noble. However, those luxurious and noble decorations seemed a little flashy. Many of the decorations only focused on the external appearance and didn't have any inner meaning. However, it was different in the Royal Azure Empire. It was completely different because the materials used for the decorations were equally luxurious. However, the inner essence was something that the Great Han Empire couldn't compare to. In this place, many of the things were directly made using godly items. Their existence had a certain effect on one's cultivation and even one's comprehension. It could be said that the Imperial Palace of the Great Han Empire was merely a palace. However, the Royal Azure Empire's Imperial Palace could be a holy land for cultivation. This was the biggest difference between the two. Sitting quietly on the most prestigious seats, Lin Yu and Lu Feng were expressionless. They looked at the National Protector General, hoping that he could explain. After instructing the palace guards and palace maids to prepare the luxurious banquet, the National Protector General dismissed everyone. He looked at Lu Feng and Lin Yu and pondered for a moment before speaking. The two of you aren't from the Qingyuan prefecture, right? Upon hearing this, Lu Feng and Lin Yu were slightly stunned. Lu Feng nodded, but Lin Yu shook his head. I have been living in the Qingyuan prefecture since young. However, what has this got to do with the fact that the teleportation array in the Royal Azure Empire can't be used? Doubt, it was really a doubt. Looking at Lin Yu's expression, the National Protector General knew that it was impossible for him to lie. However, it was precisely because he was certain that Lin Yu was from the Qingyuan prefecture that he didn't know the situation here. This made him really puzzled, because with Lin Yu's status, there was no reason for him not to know. In the next moment, he asked directly, could it be that the two of you haven't heard of it? Heard of something? Lu Feng frowned slightly. To be honest, he really didn't like guessing things like this. It could even be said that he was sick of it. Lu Feng looked at Lin Yu, hoping to see if Lin Yu knew. However, when he saw Lin Yu's expression, Lu Feng revealed a strange expression. This was because he realized that Lin Yu's expression didn't seem right. Silence. The National Protector General of the Royal Azure Empire didn't speak. He only looked at the two of them. Lu Feng also did the same. He only looked at Lin Yu. Just like that, a long time passed. Finally, Lin Yu slowly lifted his head. There was an indescribable, strange expression on his face. He looked at Lu Feng and slowly said, Lu Feng, I seem to have thought of something. After hearing his words, I carefully looked into the depths of my memories and finally understood. A trace of helplessness hung on the corner of his mouth. In his inheritance, there were simply too many memories in his mind. It was almost impossible to control all of them. Therefore, Lin Yu would usually be able to recall whatever he thought of. After hearing Lin Yu's words, Lu Feng looked over with interest. Then, what is it? Lin Yu didn't remain silent. He directly revealed everything that was in his mind. So it turned out that the Royal Azure Empire actually had a great origin. Of course, it wasn't to say that the Royal Azure Empire was terrifying or that its legends were revered. It was just that the place they were in had a great origin. The place where the Royal Azure Empire is located was once the exit of an ancient battlefield. That was the immortal devil battlefield that belonged to the end of the Four Desolates era. Immortal devil battlefield. A startling light flashed in Lu Feng's eyes. He naturally understood the significance of the immortal devil battlefield. During the end of the ancient era, there were countless heaven-shaking collisions. Those extraterritorial devils, 9 nether devils, death devils, and many other devils wanted to enter the 14 continents. Of course, even until now, those devils who lived in the depths of the 9 nether sunken region had never given up on their desire to enter. When the end of the ancient era began, many cultivators joined forces with countless immortals to fight against those devils who walked out of the Earth's surface. The collisions were so intense that it could be said that the heavens collapsed and the Earth cracked. The mountains and seas were shattered and the sun and moon lost their light. Those battles shattered countless space-time and even shattered many continents into countless pieces. In the end, some independent islands were formed in the endless sea. And this place was the entrance of one of those heaven-shaking battles. That battle was considered the ultimate battle of the Yellow Spring continent. In order to prevent the devils from entering the upper world and causing great destruction, many experts of the Yellow Spring continent eventually decided to place the battle in the underground world of the devils. After that, the most terrifying battles in the history of the Yellow Spring continent occurred. That battle caused all the geniuses of the Yellow Spring continent to sink into oblivion. Almost all the immortals were killed. Even the immortal kings were innumerable. Among them, even the mighty immortal Reverend perished. One could say that it was a true calamity. After listening till here, Lu Feng finally understood why Lin Yu said that the Royal Azure Empire was a very famous empire. Indeed, it was hard not to be shocked when one built their own palace at the exit of such a terrifying battlefield. However, what did all this have to do with the transfer array? Chapter 838. Looking at the confused expression on Lu Feng's face, Lin Yu smiled bitterly. Actually, there's a relationship between the two. Furthermore, it is a very, very big relationship. Back then, after the end of the war, there were immortal venerables from other continents that descended. They executed a world-shaking sacred art and sealed this battlefield completely. Moreover, many of the entrances were sealed with eternal and undying energy. Naturally, there are also such seals in the Imperial Azure Dynasty. Lu Feng fell silent. At this moment, he seemed to have understood something. Looking at Lin Yu, Lu Feng asked slowly, could it be that the teleportation array in the Imperial Azure Dynasty's palace was sealed at the entrance of this place? Lin Yu nodded his head gently. That is indeed the case. That teleportation array is actually a divine item. A peerless divine item at the pinnacle of the 9th grade. It is only a step away from transforming into an immortal equipment. The reason why it was placed here was to suppress those devils. Lu Feng understood and nodded lightly. At this moment, the National Protector General finally spoke. Our Imperial Azure Dynasty could actually build a teleportation array. However, due to certain reasons, the founder of our Imperial Azure Dynasty was acknowledged by that peerless divine item and was able to use its power to teleport. One must know that although a 9th grade divine item teleportation array cannot be used to teleport to other continents, theoretically speaking, as long as one has enough power, one can be teleported to any place on the Yellow Springs continent. With such a rare grade teleportation array, we have no need to build other giant teleportation arrays. Indeed, with the existence of such a teleportation array, there was no point in building other teleportation arrays. After all, a teleportation array like this was much more powerful than any other teleportation array. Lu Feng could understand their thoughts. Then, why can't we use it now? Could it be that the devils underground have started to stir again? This was the only possibility that Lu Feng could think of. The National Protector General nodded lightly. Once every 100 years, the devils underground would pass through those ancient battlefields and enter the sealed area. They would attempt to break through the seal and enter the real world. That's when the seals come into play. At this moment, Lu Feng finally understood why the great general of the state had said that at the beginning. If this was really the case, then there was no other way this time. The teleportation array needed to suppress those demonic creatures, so it was naturally impossible to use it for teleportation. After all, it was clear which was more important between the two. If that's the case, then I'll have to trouble you. Let's go to other places and slowly take the teleportation array. We'll just teleport there one by one. After saying this, Lu Feng got up and prepared to leave. Although Lin Yu didn't say anything, when he saw Lu Feng's actions, he also stood up and turned around, ready to leave. Upon seeing the two of them intending to leave, the Imperial General of the Royal Azure Empire seemed to have thought of something. He abruptly asked, "May I know where the two of you are heading to?" Lu Feng looked at him, thought for a moment, and said it. Huang Chuanzhou. Hearing these 3 words, a strange glint flashed across the eyes of the Imperial General of the Royal Azure Empire. Huang Chuanzhou is the central province of our Yellow Springs continent. It's located at the most eastern part of the continent. However, this place is slightly west of the central region. If the two of you were to rely on the teleportation array to teleport there, I'm afraid it would take at least 2 months. After some calculations, even though he didn't want to admit it, the truth was as such. Lu Feng and Lin Yu nodded lightly. At this moment, the Imperial General of the Royal Azure Empire chuckled. Since that's the case, why don't the two of you wait for a few days in my Royal Azure Empire? According to the normal calculation, the seal attack this time should end in a few days. If you were to use the teleportation array directly, you could save a lot of time. Basically, a day would be enough. Thinking about it, it would save a lot of time and energy compared to the two of you slowly teleporting there. After looking at the Imperial General for a while, Lin Yu turned to look at Lu Feng. His meaning was clear. It was up to Lu Feng to make the decision. Lu Feng didn't think too much as he nodded his head directly. If it was anyone else, they might be afraid that the Royal Azure Empire had ulterior motives for keeping them here. However, Lu Feng didn't mind, because just like what he once said, In the face of absolute power, all schemes and schemes were weak shackles. A light touch, and they would shatter into nothingness. Hence, Lu Feng didn't mind staying here. Also, if things were really as the Imperial Protector General had said, it would be best for them to wait for the right moment. Seeing Lu Feng nodding his head in agreement, Lin Yu finally agreed as well. Seeing that the two of them had agreed, the Imperial General of the Royal Azure Empire smiled brightly. He looked at the two of them and said, "Then the two of you can go and rest first. After things have settled down, I will call for the two of you." After saying this, a few figures walked into the royal palace. They were the palace's maids and guards. Looking at these people, the Imperial General of the Royal Azure Empire spoke, "Tidy up the most luxurious palace for the two esteemed guests to stay in." Many of the guards and maids bowed in acknowledgement before turning to leave. Upon seeing them leaving, Lu Feng and Lin Yu naturally followed behind them. Every time the underground devils failed, the Saint Gate would experience a period of weakness. If we want to use it again, I'm afraid we would have to pay a hefty price. Why did you suddenly agree to the conditions of these two people? From the void, a figure quietly walked out. His existence was incomparably indifferent, and no one could see any trace of extravagance. Upon seeing this figure, the Imperial General of the Royal Azure Empire didn't hesitate in the slightest. He directly knelt down and gave the most respectful greetings to this figure. "Old Ancestor, you're here." This figure was none other than the Old Ancestor of the Royal Azure Empire. He was Imperial General of the Royal Azure Empire several generations ago. In the Royal Azure Empire, the most respected person was the current emperor. However, the emperor wasn't the only respected existence. The Imperial General of the Royal Azure Empire was an existence comparable to the current emperor in terms of status and identity. Similarly, they were all from the royal family. However, unlike the current emperor, they were the most talented disciples of the royal family. From the very beginning, they were nurtured as the protectors of the Royal Azure Empire. Therefore, it was also because of this reason that the Imperial General of the Royal Azure Empire was an incomparably respected existence in every empire. They were extraordinary existences. Otherwise, how could a general stay in the Royal Azure Empire and arrange everything as he wished like the owner of the empire? The existence addressed as Old Ancestor by the Imperial General of the Royal Azure Empire was the Imperial General of the Royal Azure Empire several generations ago. Now, he had already broken through. After becoming a heavenly immortal, his seniority in the entire Royal Azure Empire was unparalleled. Therefore, when he appeared, the Imperial General of the Royal Azure Empire didn't hesitate and immediately gave him the most respectful greetings. Seeing the Old Ancestor raise his hand, the Imperial General of the Royal Azure Empire finally straightened his body. He looked at the Old Ancestor and smiled faintly. "Old Ancestor, actually, I am doing this for the good of the Empire." The Old Ancestor didn't say anything and only looked at the Imperial General of the Royal Azure Empire quietly. "Old Ancestor, regarding the current situation of our Royal Azure Empire, you should be clearer than me. Our Royal Azure Empire is one of the top 10 empires below the 4 great empires in the Qingyuan Prefecture. However, if we really want to compare our strength, we are completely unable to meet the standards of the top 10 empires." The Old Ancestor's expression didn't look too good, but he still nodded his head gently, because this was the reality of the situation. Although the Royal Azure Empire was known as a first-rate empire and was one of the top 10 empires, the difference in strength was really too big. This was because within the top 10 empires, every single one of them had a golden immortal overseeing them. In fact, the golden immortal required one to be a perfected golden immortal. However, the strongest person in the Royal Azure Empire was only the Old Ancestor in front of him, and he only had the strength of a heavenly immortal. Compared to the other first-rate empires, the difference in strength was simply too big. Therefore, the reason why they were able to become a first-rate empire was because of the existence of the Saint Gate. Due to some special reasons, they were able to use the power of the Saint Gate. Moreover, only those with the bloodline of the royal family were qualified to use it. Once the Saint Gate was used, the effect would not be inferior to any perfected golden immortal. This was also the reason why they were able to become one of the top 10 first-rate empires. However, it was obvious that relying on external forces to become one of the top 10 empires didn't give them enough confidence. This was also the reason why he couldn't wait to appear when the National Guardian General promised to allow Lu Feng and the rest to use the teleportation array after the chaos was over. Looking at the National Guardian General, the old ancestor's expression returned to normal. He didn't say anything because he knew his descendant well. He knew that there must be a deeper meaning behind his actions. The National Guardian General looked at the old ancestor and continued to smile. Old ancestor, perhaps you have heard that the place they are heading to this time is the Huangquan Prefecture, the central prefecture of our Yellow Springs mainland. You should know about this. The old ancestor nodded his head gently. I have heard it, but so what? In the Yellow Springs mainland, other than the disciples who are nurtured by the major sects, the other geniuses and monstrous geniuses will choose to go to the Huangquan Prefecture. After all, it is the central prefecture and the place where countless geniuses and experts gather. But so what? It's normal for them to go there. The National Guardian General continued to smile, but there were many hidden meanings in his smile. Old ancestor, one of the two who just arrived, has the surname Lin. He is at least a king realm cultivator. I can vaguely sense that he might be an emperor realm cultivator. This time, the old ancestor's eyes shone with an unprecedented light. The one with the surname Lin, an emperor realm cultivator. Emperor-level monstrous geniuses were the most precious disciples in any emperor-level sect. There were only a handful of such cultivators in the entire Yellow Springs mainland. Moreover, the one with the surname Lin. This made the old ancestor and the old ancestor think more about it. Lin Langton, is it possible for him? The National Guardian General calmed down after hearing the old ancestor's words. Old ancestor, it doesn't matter if he is really a disciple of Lin Longtian's Lin clan. It's good for us to befriend such a monstrous genius. After all, he might be an emperor realm cultivator. The primogenitor was silent for a moment. After a while, he nodded his head gently and disappeared completely into the void. The National Guardian General looked at the old ancestor's back as he left. In the end, he smiled faintly. Old ancestor, it doesn't matter if he is or not. We have to give it a try. Moreover, the one who caught my attention isn't Lin Yu, but the young man beside him. Chapter 839. After returning to their own resting place, Lin Yu had already told Lu Feng everything about the Imperial Azure Dynasty. It was only now that Lu Feng finally found out about so many things. In fact, compared to the Imperial Azure Dynasty, Lu Feng was more concerned about the many devils in the depths of the 9 underworlds. Lu Feng was far more interested in them than anything else. However, it was a pity that Lin Yu didn't know much about these existences. In his inherited memories, the amount he knew was also extremely limited. Even though he didn't know much, Lu Feng was satisfied with this. They spent the day peacefully in the palace. The second day, the third day, the fourth day. They waited until the 5th day, and there was still no news. At this time, Lu Feng finally couldn't sit still anymore. Lin Yu didn't feel anything when he cultivated in such an ordinary environment. This was because this was his cultivation method, and the way he cultivated had always been like this. However, Lu Feng was not used to cultivating quietly in such an environment. He was not used to it at all. Therefore, Lu Feng wanted to leave this place very much. He wanted to make use of the endless battles to improve his strength as soon as possible. Therefore, when there was still no news on the 5th day, Lu Feng finally couldn't sit still anymore. After discussing with Lin Yu, the two of them directly headed to the depths of the palace to look for the National Guardian General. In the palace, they didn't use any void-tearing techniques, so their speed was limited. After walking for half a day, they finally arrived at the deepest part of the palace, which belonged to the National Guardian General. Before they arrived, the National Guardian General was already standing quietly at the entrance, personally welcoming the two of them. As one of the two masters of the palace, the National Guardian General was naturally aware of the movements of Lu Feng and Lin Yu. Therefore, before the two of them arrived, he was already standing quietly at the entrance to welcome them. The moment he saw the two of them, the National Guardian General revealed a trace of a smile. "What's wrong? Are the two of you not used to living here?" Upon hearing this, Lu Feng and Lin Yu shook their heads gently. The environment here was really good. Furthermore, the treatment they received was absolutely top-notch. However, because they had something on their minds, they naturally couldn't stay for a long time. Looking at the great general of the state, Lu Feng directly said, "We are living very comfortably here. I would like to thank the Grand General and the Imperial Qing dynasty for their hospitality these past few days. It's just that 5 days have already passed. I don't know when the teleportation array will be activated. We really don't want to wait any longer." Hearing this, the National Protector General fell silent for a moment before revealing a bitter smile. Actually, according to the countless times in the past, the attack of the demons should have ended by the time you arrived. But I don't know why, but the impact this time seems to be taking too long. I didn't expect that after another 5 days, it's still not over. Hearing this, Lu Feng couldn't say anything. After all, others didn't do it deliberately. Seeing Lu Feng's silence, the nation-protecting general hesitated for a moment, and then said, "I don't have any confidence in when the attack of the monsters will end this time. It might be today, or it might be tomorrow, but it shouldn't be too long ago. From the bottom of my heart, I still hope that the two of you can wait a little longer. This way, it will be much faster than if you teleported here alone." Hearing this, Lin Yu nodded slightly and turned to look at Lu Feng. Seeing that Lin Yu gave the right to decide to Lu Feng, a strange glint flashed across the eyes of the National Protector General. But then he also looked at Lu Feng. At this moment, after sensing their gazes, Lu Feng finally stopped being silent. He looked at the National Protector General, and after hesitating for a moment, he said, "Great General, I have a presumptuous request. I don't know if you can agree to it." Hearing this, the National Protector General slightly raised his brows and nodded slightly. Lu Feng looked at the two and said, "I don't know if I can go to the sealed land. I want to wait there. If it's done, then I can leave directly." In fact, Lu Feng's real goal was the sealed land. He really wanted to see that mysterious sealed land. After hearing about the monsters, Lu Feng couldn't help but think of one of the two great cultivation techniques he cultivated, the incomparably mysterious Great Demon True Body. At first, Lu Feng thought that the demons in the Great Demon True Body referred to the demons of the primitive immortal demon era. But later on, he found out that everything wasn't as simple as he thought. Because the demons of the primitive immortal demon era, he already knew about their true origins. They were actually from the immortal race. There were some monstrous powerhouses that walked a different path from the immortal race. Although there were many similarities between the Great Demon True Body and the Great Demon True Body, there were also many differences. Lu Feng really didn't know the origin of those demons. Now that he was able to come here and hear about the existence of demons, he naturally wanted to take a look. Seeing Lu Feng's slightly expectant expression, the great general of the nation eventually nodded his head. The existence of the sealed land wasn't a secret, so bringing Lu Feng there wasn't much of a problem. Seeing the great general of the nation's expression, Lu Feng felt a burst of joy. He looked at the great general of the nation and asked, "Great general of the nation, great general, may I know when we can set off?" The great general of the nation looked at Lu Feng and said with a smile, "Anytime, as long as you want." Lu Feng nodded his head and looked at Lin Yu beside him. "Lin Yu, if you don't want to go, then stay in the palace. When it's ready, I will let the great general inform you." When he heard Lu Feng's words, Lin Yu smiled and shook his head. "Since you're going, I will naturally accompany you. I have nothing to do here, so I will go there to take a look and broaden my horizons." At their level, they didn't care about external pleasures. Although the sealed land might be incomparably difficult, Lin Yu really didn't care. Compared to waiting here in boredom, He hoped to go with Lu Feng. Then, let's go together. The two of them looked at the great general of the nation. The great general of the nation didn't let them wait for long. He directly tore open the void and took the lead to enter it. Lu Feng didn't hesitate at all. He didn't even make any changes and directly walked into the void crack. Seeing that Lu Feng didn't even observe the void crack, Lin Yu hesitated slightly and chose the same method. He also didn't observe the void crack and walked into it. When they came out, they had already arrived in an endlessly gloomy world. Lu Feng could feel that this should be the Yellow Springs continent. However, they weren't on the surface anymore. Instead, they were in an underground place. Sure enough, the great general of the nation's voice suddenly sounded. This is the Devil Sealing Land located in the eastern part of the Imperial Azure Empire. This Devil Sealing Land is located at the edge of the underground. Lu Feng gently nodded his head. His expression was still incomparably indifferent. However, no one could see that in the depths of Lu Feng's eyes, there was an incomparably complicated expression. There was even an incomparably excited expression. The real Devil Sealing Land is not far ahead. It will take some time to get there from here. Let's hurry. At a certain time every day, there might be some devil energy leaking out from a seal. Although they aren't strong, it will be quite troublesome if we encounter them. In the surroundings of the Holy Gate, there is a powerful seal domain. No demonic creature can invade that place. Therefore, we should hurry to the edge of the Holy Gate, and everything will be fine. Naturally, it would be best if there was less trouble. Obviously, Lu Feng also had the same thoughts. Therefore, he followed closely behind the great general of the nation and flew into the distance. Along the way, Lu Feng could vaguely feel a lot of energy fluctuations. The degree of strength was comparable to those in the Tribulation Realm or even the Void Immortal Realm. At the beginning, when they encountered the Void Immortal Realm energy, the great general of the nation wanted to help Lu Feng block it. After all, Lu Feng's current strength was only at the Void Immortal Realm. However, after seeing it twice, the great general of the nation gave up on this idea. It was also from this moment onwards that he was even more certain that Lu Feng was an incomparably terrifying monster. He was even more terrifying than the immortal realm Lin Yu beside him. Even when facing those energy existences, Lin Yu still had to disperse them. However, what Lu Feng did was to ignore them. He completely ignored them. No matter how those powerful forces attacked his body, he did not move at all. Such a scene shocked the great general of the nation. However, when he saw Lin Yu, who was beside Lu Feng, he vaguely understood something after seeing the look in Lin Yu's eyes. He took a light breath. Without waiting for anything, he began to fly into the distance with all his strength. After flying for nearly half a day, the two of them finally saw the existence of the Holy Gate. It penetrated heaven and earth, as if it was supporting the entire underground world. The existence of this teleportation gate was more than 1,000 times larger than the one Lu Feng had seen in the Upper Immortal Sect's subsect. After seeing Lu Feng's shocked expression, the great general of the nation smiled slightly and slowly explained. This is the main body of the Holy Gate. What we usually use for teleportation is its projected power. The existence of the Holy Gate is incomparably huge. Its power is terrifying. It is not inferior to any peak Almighty Immortal. It is almost at the peak of Grade 9 artifacts. Lin Yu nodded his head gently. His eyes were filled with turbulence. However, Lu Feng continued to fly, as if he had not heard the great general of the nation's words. Of course, Lu Feng had really heard it. However, he did not want to say anything. Lu Feng really wanted to scoff at the great general of the nation's words. Lu Feng really wanted to scoff at them. How is this a peak Grade 9 artifact? It is at least a Grade 10 artifact. Others might not understand, but Lu Feng, who had entered the Sovereign Path domain, had come into contact with the Great Wilderness Totem, which was almost a Grade 13 artifact. He had also come into contact with the Human King Hall, which was a peak Grade 12 artifact. He had also come into contact with the Gufang Star, which was an even more mysterious artifact. How could he not sense it? Chapter 840. You might be able to deceive experts like the Divine King, but you definitely won't be able to deceive me. Lu Feng couldn't be mistaken. When they finally arrived in front of the Holy Gate, Lu Feng was completely sure the existence of this Holy Gate was really a 10th grade Emperor artifact, which was the equivalent of an immortal artifact in the second universe. Moreover, Lu Feng clearly knew that this immortal artifact belonged to the pinnacle level. In other words, this was a peak 10th grade Emperor artifact, a peak 10th grade immortal artifact. How is it, Lu Feng? Are you shocked? Lu Feng nodded his head gently. This Holy Gate is really mighty, Lin Fan exclaimed. Lin Yu was dumbfounded. Unlike Lu Feng, who had seen so many things, although he had awakened a lot of memories and knowledge, it was a pity that they were all awakened and had nothing to do with him. Therefore, when he saw the Holy Gate, he couldn't help but be stunned. Lu Feng walked gently, not caring about the two people beside him. Seeing Lu Feng's footsteps, the great general of the state was slightly puzzled, but he still followed him. At this moment, he could completely see through it. Although Lin Yu was a monster and might even be an emperor-level existence, compared to this young man in front of him, Lin Yu should be secondary. Lin Yu prioritized this young man, who was just a pseudo-immortal. Moreover, this young man's performance had made the great general of the state completely understand Lu Feng's restrained luxury and nobility. He didn't need to deliberately express anything. He only needed to show his existence. If someone really understood, really looked with their heart, they would understand his existence. Lu Feng's existence alone was enough to make people unable to ignore his existence. Seeing Lu Feng move, Lin Yu finally woke up from his shock. He followed Lu Feng's footsteps and walked over. Soon, the three of them arrived at the huge Holy Gate and stood at the bottom. Looking at the gazes of these people in front of him, Lu Feng didn't care. What existed in his eyes was still the Holy Gate. Or rather, it could be said that behind the Holy Gate was the endless darkness and death of the world. Seeing Lu Feng's slightly strange expression, an existence walked out from under the Holy Gate. That was a true immortal existence, the only one refined, extremely powerful. The moment he walked out, the great general of the state's eyes flashed with a strange look. That existence didn't stop and walked directly towards them, in the direction of the state's general of the state. Soon, in a few steps, to reach the great general of the state. Seeing Lu Feng, who was walking towards the great general of the state, he finally turned to look at the great general of the state and Lin Yu, the emperors to the great general of the state and Lin to the great general of the state. What's the matter? The great general of the state of the Imperial Green Cloud Empire, one of the top 10 empires, actually came to personally oversee this place. The word personally was heavily emphasized, and the sarcastic look on his face was even more intense. Looking at him, the great general of the state frowned slightly and said, "Yu Feng, I don't wish to quarrel with you today." After saying this, he directly walked in the direction of Lu Feng. Looking at this scene, Lin Yu frowned slightly. However, when he saw the symbol of the Red Sun Empire on Yu Feng's body, he vaguely understood what was going on. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he followed the great general of the state in the direction of Lu Feng. The Red Sun Empire was one of the top empires among the many second-rate empires in the Qingyuan prefecture. It could be said that in many aspects, they weren't inferior to the top 10 first-rate empires. Compared to the Imperial Green Cloud Empire, in terms of overall strength, they were far superior. However, the Red Sun Empire was ultimately a second-rate empire, while the Imperial Green Cloud Empire was a first-rate empire. The resources and treatment that a first-rate empire could receive were far superior to a second-rate empire. It was the dream of any second-rate empire to become a first-rate empire. However, it was a pity that the number of first-rate empires was limited to 10. This was a rule set by the 4 great empires. One must know that the existence of the top 10 empires wasn't inferior to any of the top king-class sections. They could be said to be the true dominating existence. Even the high immortal sects couldn't do anything to them. When the top 10 empires jointly issued such a rule, no existence could resist. Moreover, the High Immortal Sects wouldn't want to offend the four great empires over such a small matter. Therefore, the existence of the top 10 empires was one and only. This was something that couldn't be changed. As long as the top 10 empires didn't have any vacancies, even the second-rate empires at the peak would always be second-rate empires. It was also because of this reason that the Red Sun Empire was rather hostile towards the Imperial Green Cloud Empire. It could even be said that they looked down on the Imperial Green Cloud Empire. Coincidentally, they were located at the border of the Imperial Green Cloud Empire. Every time the underground devils attacked the surface, other than the suppression of the Saint Gate, the surrounding empires would also send out true experts to guard the area, just in case something happened. This Yufeng was one of the experts sent by the Red Sun Empire to guard the area. He was also one of the strongest existences in terms of strength. Looking at the back view of the State Protector General, Yufeng's face was frosty. If it wasn't for the Saint Gate, our Red Sun Empire would have annihilated all of you long ago. He didn't have any intention of hiding his voice. The hundreds of godly existences in the surroundings could hear him clearly. However, after hearing his words, they didn't show any reaction. In fact, many of them even revealed a mocking expression as they looked in the direction of the State Protector General. Seeing the gazes of these people, the State Protector General only paused for a moment before continuing to walk forward. Lin Yu's eyes were filled with amusement. At this moment, he finally understood how difficult it was for the Imperial Green Cloud Empire to be a first-rate empire. Not only did the State Protector General not show the slightest bit of respect, they even displayed such an attitude. From this, it could be seen that the prestige of the Imperial Green Cloud Empire was really too low. While these people were talking, Lu Feng had already stopped in his tracks. At this moment, he was quietly looking at the Heavenly Saint Gate. There was an indescribable expression on his face. Looking at the huge Saint Gate, in the next moment, under the gaze of Lin Yu and the State Protector General, he actually closed it just like that. Silence, an unusual silence. Looking at the expression on Lu Feng's face, the State Protector General was puzzled. He didn't understand why Lu Fenglai would display such emotions when he came here. He opened his mouth and wanted to ask, but at this moment, Lin Yu stretched out his hand and stopped him. Lu Feng is behaving like this. He must have sensed something. Don't disturb him. Looking at the solemn expression on Lin Yu's face, the State Protector General opened his mouth slightly, but ultimately didn't say anything. Just like that, both of them fell silent. It was a pity that their silence didn't mean that everyone else was as silent as them. This was because at this moment, Yu Feng, who had spoken previously, spoke up again. I say, Your Majesty, the State Protector General, have you forgotten something? This is the land of sealed demons. The existence of this place is incomparably important to our empires, the entire Upper River Province, the entire Qingyuan Province, and even the entire Yellow Springs mainland. If something happens here, can the Imperial Green Cloud Empire bear the responsibility? As he spoke, a sinister expression appeared on his face. Hearing this, Lin Yu frowned slightly. He looked at Yu Feng and said, "What's the matter? Let's talk later." At this moment, Lin Yu didn't have his usual modesty. Indeed, he shouldn't have been so humble. Even if he wasn't a descendant of the Lin family of Lin Langtian, his monstrous Emperor Realm identity was enough to look down on everyone. His identity, when placed in the four empires, belonged to the category of imperial princes that didn't appear for thousands of years. His nobility naturally wasn't something these people could compare to. Naturally, it was far from what these people could compare to. Therefore, when he saw the attitude of these people, Lin Yu was really impatient. It was a pity that these people didn't know Lin Yu's identity, and Lin Yu seemed to have forgotten to explain his identity. When he suddenly saw a junior of the immortal realm provoking him, as a true god, how could he be so indifferent? In an instant, his face was filled with a gloomy expression. Vaguely, there was even a slight fluctuation in his emotions. However, Yu Feng still didn't make a move. He only looked at the State Protector General, hoping that the latter could give him an explanation. State Protector General, we respect you as the State Protector General of the Imperial Green Cloud Empire. However, this doesn't mean that anyone in the Imperial Green Cloud Empire has the right to reprimand us. His expression was incomparably gloomy at this moment. Looking at Yu Feng, the State Protector General wanted to say something. However, before he could say anything, Lin Yu had already spoken. Do you have any objections? Although Lin Yu appeared calm, there was a slight flicker of emotion in his eyes. At this moment, he was really excited and nervous. This was because Lin Yu had never really fought with anyone until now. Although he had gained a lot of experience and knowledge, Lin Yu's knowledge was still theoretical. The only battle he had had was with Lu Feng. However, it was a pity that Lu Feng's existence was far beyond his imagination. Going against Lu Feng was a fate of being crushed. Therefore, to be honest, he had never really fought with anyone. Now, it seemed like the battle was about to begin. Lin Yu's words not only stunned Yu Feng and the surrounding people who were waiting to see a joke, but even the National Protector General was stunned. All of them were puzzled and looked at Lin Yu in shock, as if they didn't know why he would say such a thing. In the next moment, the State Protector General suddenly spoke. Lin Yu, don't be rash. This is the State Protector General of the Red Sun Empire. His strength has reached the level of a high-level true immortal. You're no match for him. Although he had guessed that Lin Yu might be an Emperor Realm monster, it would still be difficult for an Emperor Realm monster to go against a high-level true immortal. Of course, the main reason was because he could tell that Lin Yu was truly very young. Generally speaking, someone as young as Lin Yu would possess astonishing talent. However, due to the fact that they had lived for too short a period of time, their abilities would be limited as well. Thus, it was impossible for them to defeat a high-level true immortal. If it was in the past, Lin Yu would have given up. After all, theoretically, he could challenge a high-level true immortal. However, that was only in theory. In reality, Lin Yu knew that he was still lacking. After all, he didn't cultivate all the way. But now, the situation hadn't changed. However, Lin Yu's decision had changed. He would no longer choose to retreat blindly. Chapter 841. Lu Feng once said that true geniuses walk the line between life and death, lingering in the abyss. If one doesn't experience life and death, how can one be considered a monster? In the past, I only had the talent of monster, but I didn't have the heart of a monster. If this continues, then even if my talent is heaven-defying, what can I do? This time, let me see if I'm really a qualified monster. Lin Yu's heart was in turmoil, and his eyes naturally expressed it perfectly. At this moment, Lin Yu was filled with a vigorous battle intent. Seeing him like this, the Imperial Protector General of the Red Sun Empire, Yu Feng, couldn't stay any longer. He could feel that this young man, who was merely an early-stage immortal, wanted to make a move. He actually wanted to fight with him. This was something that Yu Feng couldn't allow. You, are you trying to challenge my authority? Are you trying to provoke the dignity of a true immortal? Lin Yu didn't say a word, but the light in his eyes grew even brighter. Such an attitude was enough to explain everything. It was enough to let many people understand. Exhaling gently, the power around him started to fluctuate and grow stronger. It had even risen to the level of a true immortal. Originally, I shouldn't have taught you a lesson on account of the Imperial Azure Empire behind you. After all, you're just an immortal, and I'm a true immortal. But this time, you've really gone overboard. Even if I don't want to, I have no choice. His eyes were filled with endless craziness, and his words were filled with righteousness. But after hearing these words, the Imperial Protector General of the Imperial Azure Empire sneered. He knew that this was an excuse. This was just an excuse for Yu Feng to humiliate the Imperial Azure Empire. He treated Lin Yu as a monster of the Imperial Azure Empire. Even though the Red Sun Empire couldn't replace the Imperial Azure Empire's position, they were more than willing to humiliate the Imperial Azure Empire in front of their neighbors. This person also understood that Yu Feng's words were really just an excuse. But they didn't say anything because they couldn't afford to offend the Red Sun Empire. Compared to the Imperial Azure Empire, they didn't want to offend the Red Sun Empire even more. Lin Yu looked at him and finally smiled. It was an indescribable smile. It's useless to say more. Don't come up with such ridiculous excuses. If you want to make a move, go ahead. Vaguely, Lin Yu's aura had completely recovered. At this moment, he held nothing back, nor would he hold anything back. Lin Yu knew that if he wanted to rely on his own strength to defeat a high-level true immortal, he could not afford to make any mistakes. It was precisely because of this reason that he instantly activated his most powerful state. At this moment, power, which also belonged to a high-level true god, completely bloomed between heaven and earth. Over 100 immortals and existences above them stared blankly at Lin Yu in the distance. They seemed to have seen some shocking phenomenon and even forgot to breathe for a moment. How is this possible? Many people murmured, their eyes trembling unconsciously. They didn't know how to describe the shock in their hearts. The scene before their eyes was too shocking and too unbelievable. In the beginning, they thought that Lin Yu was a monster, but he was at most a level 4 monster. As for those above the King realm, they didn't even dare to think about it. However, when Lin Yu erupted with his full strength, they came to a sudden realization that Lin Yu was actually a monarch-rank genius. How could they be willing to believe it? Yufeng looked at Lin Yu, his arms were trembling slightly. At this moment, he finally understood one thing. He finally understood clearly that he had made a mistake all along. When he first saw Lin Yu walking over, he thought that the two of them were the next generation of geniuses groomed by the Imperial Azure dynasty. This time, they were only here to let them see the sealed land. But at that time, he was also a little puzzled. That was the attitude of the two of them towards the Imperial Azure dynasty's Imperial General. Their attitude towards this person, who should be a teacher or a senior, was very calm. Although it couldn't be said that they disregarded him, the indifference they displayed really puzzled Yufeng. Now, he finally understood. The two of them weren't the younger generation of the Imperial Azure dynasty. They must be at least royal sects or those top empires of the continent, monstrous existences that only appeared once every 10 million years and were groomed with all their might. Now, Yufeng was really riding a tiger and couldn't get off. Naturally, he knew what such monstrous existences represented. If he offended such an existence, then even the Red Sun Empire behind him wouldn't be able to protect him. Thinking of this, his body actually started to tremble slightly. However, Lin Yu acted as if he hadn't seen anything. His eyes were still filled with a crazed will. "Let's fight. Let me see how you're going to educate me." As he spoke, Lin Yu finally raised all his power to the peak. At this moment, he was really a high-level true immortal. Of course, although he was a high-level true immortal, when it came to power, he was still a little lacking compared to a real high-level true immortal. After all, he was only at a higher level. There was still a certain gap between his power and his will to battle. Moreover, although his opponent was a high-level true immortal, his opponent was a level 3 genius. Although he couldn't be considered a monstrous existence in terms of strength, he was comparable to a heavenly immortal. No matter how Lin Yu thought about it, he had no chance of winning. However, even though this was the case, he was no longer afraid. Just like what Lu Feng said, if he retreated time and time again, then even if he had the talent of an emperor, he wouldn't have any hope of reaching the pinnacle in the future. Hearing Lin Yu's words and seeing the ferocious aura, Yufeng took a deep breath. At this moment, his eyes were filled with determination. For existences like them, although they couldn't completely see through life and death in their hearts, there were many things that were beyond life and death. And glory was one of them. At this moment, for glory, he had to fight even if he didn't want to. In the next moment, he also released all his power. He didn't say anything superfluous because he really didn't need to. Looking at Lin Yu, Yufeng didn't hesitate at all. He directly released a true immortal attack that shook the world. However, The Imperial Protector General of the Green Cloud Imperial Empire could sense that Yufeng was still holding back in this attack, because he was worried that this attack would directly kill Lin Yu. Yufeng held back because he was strong enough, but Lin Yu wouldn't, because he didn't know if his strength was enough to go against Yufeng. Therefore, he used his strongest power from start. A collision occurred instantly. This was the territory of the Holy Gate. Their strength was only at the level of a true immortal. At most, they could only damage the ground a little. Therefore, when they saw the two of them using their strongest power, the surrounding existences only moved aside and no one stopped them. The void trembled. Vaguely, the ground was shaking continuously. Everyone believed that if they weren't in this territory, the collision just now would have caused the entire ground to disappear into nothingness. These were two true immortal existences. If they were allowed to go on a killing spree, even a small empire would be wiped out completely. A punch came out, bringing with it endless darkness. This was a kind of comprehension of the true essence of darkness. The current Yufeng was already a high-level true immortal. Once he became a heavenly immortal, he would be able to comprehend the laws. Therefore, what he came into contact with now was the true essence of darkness. The world of endless darkness was constantly devouring. In the face of this, Lin Yu only smiled coldly. In his opinion, Yufeng's control over his strength was too weak compared to Lu Fenglai, although the strength Lu Feng used was the same as him, which was much lesser than the strength Yufeng was using now. He felt that Lu Feng was the one who was truly undefeatable. It was a kind of complete coverage without any gaps. It was a kind of pressure from the soul to the body. It was the most perfect combination. It was a kind of terrifying suppression that couldn't be resisted at all. Having gradually adapted to Lu Feng's invincible crushing power, Lin Yu didn't feel the slightest bit of discomfort when facing this at this moment. He even felt that the power Yufeng used was full of flaws. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Finally, he saw at the last moment. Lin Yu didn't stop at all. He directly used a peerless killing move. This was a cultivation technique that belonged to the awakening of his memory. It was a kind of extraordinary and terrifying combat skill. When Lu Feng had first sensed it, he had once said that the power of this cultivation technique was comparable to any supreme cultivation technique. Although he didn't understand what this supreme cultivation technique meant, Lin Yu could feel Lu Feng's admiration for this cultivation technique that he used. Lin Yu already understood that this cultivation technique should be the cultivation technique of the #1 sect of the Yellow Springs continent, the #1 family of the Lin Langtian. Moreover, its level shouldn't be low. It might even be a core cultivation technique. Therefore, when Lin Yu used this cultivation technique, the power of this cultivation technique wasn't just a little bit. Easily, Lin Yu unleashed a power that made people tremble. In an instant, he sent Yufeng flying. Such a scene caused everyone to be shocked, although many of them could see that Yufeng had gone easy on him. But after all, this was a high-level true immortal. A real high-level true immortal. And Yufeng's existence was also a level 3 demonic existence. No matter how one looked at it, it was impossible for him to lose to Lin Yu. But this was the reality. He was actually easily sent flying far away by Lin Yu. This was simply too shocking. Silence. Silence. Countless people couldn't describe the shock in their hearts at this moment. Of course, the ones who were the most shocked were the Imperial Protector General of the Imperial Qingyan Empire and Yufeng. They weren't shocked by Lin Yu's strength, but the cultivation technique that Lin Yu used. They had seen this cultivation technique in the grand competition of the Central State. They had only seen it once, and they had completely memorized it. They thought that this cultivation technique represented the supreme supremacy of the entire Yellow Springs continent. Lin Yu is actually an existence that walked out of that place. Chapter 842. This was Lin Longtian's cultivation technique. It was the supreme cultivation technique of the Lin family. Yufeng looked at Lin Yu in horror. He really didn't know what to say at this moment. He had already guessed that Lin Yu's background might be extraordinary, but he definitely didn't expect it to be so terrifying. It was actually the inheritance of the strongest overlord of the yellow spring continent, Lin Langtin. These three words were uttered with great difficulty. At this moment, the hundreds of gods were completely silent. Their breathing was incomparably rapid. It was impossible to describe the complicated feelings in their hearts. Looking at their faces full of reverence, Lin Yu smiled helplessly and dispersed all of his aura. This was because he knew that such a battle could no longer be carried out. Although he didn't do what Lu Feng said, this short contact made Lin Yu understand one thing, and that was that he really wasn't weak, not weak at all. Previously, Lu Feng had shown the same strength as Lin Yu, but Lin Yu was suppressed every time. This made Lin Yu doubt his own strength. But now Lin Yu understood that it wasn't that he was too weak, but that Lu Feng was too strong. Although they were at the same level of strength, Lu Feng represented an unrivaled level of strength. It was natural that Lin Yu couldn't defeat him. After all, he is an emperor. Lin Yu exhaled slightly. He didn't look at these people anymore. Instead, he locked his eyes on Lu Feng. Although Lin Yu's attitude wasn't good, these people didn't dare to say anything. Before, when they didn't know Lin Yu's identity, they could still mock him. However, when they found out that Lin Yu was an emperor-level monstrous genius, all their contempt disappeared. Now, after seeing Lin Yu display the cultivation method of Lin Longtian's Lin family, they were filled with awe. They knew that Lin Yu must be a member of the Lin family. He must be a member of the strongest force of the Yellow Spring continent. Moreover, he was an emperor-level monster, and he could even display the cultivation technique of the Lin family. He must be a direct descendant of the Lin family, or even a core disciple. In terms of status, such an existence was much more honorable than the ruler of a dynasty. How could this not be awe-inspiring? At this moment, many people's gazes were focused on Lu Feng. They knew that someone who could attract the attention of a direct descendant of the Lin family was definitely not an ordinary person. Moreover, these people could feel that between Lin Yu and Lu Feng was the one in a dominant position, an existence that could make a direct descendant of the Lin family so respectful. This person must be a terrifying existence. Could it be that he's the future sect leader of Lin Langtian, the young master of the Lin family? At this moment, everyone was shocked by their own thoughts. They couldn't believe that this was true. Of course, Lu Feng was indeed not a member of the Lin family, and the Defender-in-Chief knew this. This was because he knew that as the Overlord of the Yellow Spring continent and the #1 family in Lin Langtian, the disciples of the Lin family would never change their names. They would never change their names. Even if they had to hide their identities, they would never change their surnames. Lu Feng's surname was Lu. This proved that he couldn't be a member of the Lin family of the Lin family. Feeling the gazes of many people, Lin Yu remained silent. This was the first time he saw Lu Feng like this. It could be said that the current Lu Feng gave him a very peculiar feeling. It could no longer be described with words. Right now, Lu Feng had a focused expression that Lin Yu had never seen before. Everyone looked at Lu Feng. Lu Feng was still the same as before. He was still calm and steady. After a long time, Lu Feng finally moved. At this moment, he slowly raised his head. His eyes suddenly opened. In an instant, there seemed to be a turbulence between heaven and earth. This kind of power was simply indescribable and unimaginable. Lu Feng's lips curled into a smile that others couldn't understand. He just smiled like that. So, that's it. He softly spat out 4 words from his mouth. 4 words that no one would understand. He raised his head and looked at the huge holy gate. Finally, he slowly walked in the direction of the holy gate. Lu Feng, what's wrong? Lin Yu's voice sounded behind him. In a few steps, he had already arrived beside Lu Feng. There was a strange and incomparably dignified expression on his face. Hearing Lin Yu's words, Lu Feng was still smiling. He smiled and shook his head. Since I'm here, and since I'm fated to be here, I should help this place. Perhaps this is their hope for me. Lu Feng's words raised countless questions in Lin Yu's heart. He was puzzled. He wanted to ask something, But Lu Feng didn't care about his attitude. He continued to walk, still walking in the direction of the Holy Gate. The moment Lu Feng saw the Holy Gate, he had already sensed a faint fluctuation in the depths of the Holy Gate. Lu Feng was very familiar with this fluctuation. He used to be very familiar with it. This was the feeling that came from the weapon spirit. He didn't expect that this peak 10th grade Emperor weapon would have its own spirit. Undoubtedly, this was very unbelievable. In the beginning, Lu Feng wanted to try to communicate with the weapon spirit. When his soul was communicating with the weapon spirit, Lu Feng could clearly feel the fluctuation of the weapon spirit. And this weapon spirit, as he had expected, did not need to spend time to communicate with it. Lu Feng didn't expect that the weapon spirit would choose to communicate with him directly. In this way, Lu Feng saved a lot of time. Almost in an instant, he already knew everything. He finally understood the situation here. He finally understood why this time it took so long to end. In the depths, this time, an incomparably terrifying demonic creature has come. It's actually a demonic creature of the virtual king level. I didn't expect it to walk out of the battlefield and come to the edge of the area. It seems that I'm really here to help them. This was just a small exit. According to what he had said before, the most powerful demonic creatures that came here were at the true immortal level. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many true immortal level existences guarding here. But this time, a golden immortal level demonic creature had walked out, and there was more than one of them. It could be imagined that if they were allowed to rush out of the seal, even if only one or two of them rushed out of the seal before they were wiped out, what kind of massacre would it cause? Although he wasn't a living creature here, Lu Feng still had to take care of this situation. This was his character, and this time he still had a reason to take care of it. In the beginning, Lu Feng didn't know why the weapon spirit chose to communicate with him, but later, he understood that everything was actually like this. It turns out that in the great devil true body, the so-called demon existence is actually smelting these demonic creatures. It turns out that my physical body actually has such a function. In the underground world of the battlefield, anyone would be suppressed countless times, unable to use even 10% of their strength. It could be said that even if the flowing time immortal venerable entered here, he would only be equivalent to a peak immortal king. If that wasn't the case, then how could an immortal venerable fall in this dark world? One must know that the existence of an immortal venerable was called the flowing time immortal venerable. They were existences that lived and died together with time. If the flowing time immortal venerable was suppressed to this extent, then an ordinary golden immortal would probably only be able to use the power of a heavenly immortal. But he was different. With the invincible body condensed from the great devil true body, when he faced those demonic creatures in this underground battlefield, not only would he not be suppressed in the slightest, he could even face them head-on, infinitely weakening his opponents and gain the upper hand. Lu Feng really didn't expect that one of his two strongest cultivation techniques, the great devil true body, would have such a relationship with the demonic creatures in this underground world. Because of this reason, he couldn't just ignore it. Therefore, when he found out about this, Lu Feng decided to intervene. Finally, when Lu Feng was getting closer to the Saint Gate and was about to reach it, a voice suddenly rang in his ears. Lu Feng, just a little further ahead, and you will enter the seal. It is extremely dangerous there. Even a peak true immortal would fall in an instant. Even a heavenly immortal would be in great danger and might disappear at any time. The one who spoke was the Imperial Guardian General of the Imperial Azure Empire. Hearing this voice, Lu Feng stopped in his tracks. He turned around and looked at those existences who were watching him. He shook his head lightly. Although this matter has nothing to do with me, strictly speaking, it was specially prepared for me. So this time I have to go in. After saying this, Lu Feng directly walked in. When they saw this scene and heard those words, many existences were stunned. A moment later, their expressions changed greatly. It was truly a great change. They had heard Lu Feng's last words. He wanted to enter this place. He actually wanted to enter the sealed land. This caused many existences to be incomparably shocked. Although they didn't know what Lu Feng's identity was, when they saw Lin Yu's attitude of following him, they knew that Lu Feng's identity was probably incomparably noble. In fact, it might even be higher than Lin Longtian's Lin clan's direct descendant. If such an existence were to fall here, they could imagine the terrifying consequences. The Imperial Guardian General of the Imperial Azure Empire glanced at Lin Yu, wanting him to speak up and persuade him. Unfortunately, Lin Yu only stood there with a look of hesitation. A moment later, he moved. Seeing this, many people heaved a sigh of relief. They could finally be at ease. Unfortunately, before they could completely let go of their worries, Lin Yu's next sentence made them instantly tense up again. Lu Feng, I will accompany you. Lu Feng, I will accompany you. Didn't this mean that he, Lin Yu, would have to enter as well? Cold sweat, countless cold sweat. These existences were really going crazy at this moment. Just one Lu Feng wasn't enough. They even had to involve a direct descendant of the Lin clan. If something really went wrong, not to mention the terrifying power behind Lu Feng, just the existence of Lin Langtian was enough to wipe them all out in a fit of rage. After recovering from their shock, the Imperial Guardian General and Lin Yu exchanged glances and nodded their heads firmly. In the next moment, they were all shaken. At this moment, the Imperial Guardian General had already appeared beside Lin Yu and extended his hand to stop him. Seeing this, Lin Yu frowned slightly. "You, what do you mean by this?" Hearing Lin Yu's words, the Imperial Guardian General could only smile bitterly. "Young Master Lin, this place is really too dangerous. Not to mention your current strength. Even if you were twice as strong as a true immortal, it would still be very dangerous for you to enter this place. This is our Imperial Azure Empire. We can't just watch you walk towards death like this." Chapter 843. Lin Yu frowned. To be honest, he really wanted to enter together with Lu Feng. He didn't know why, but in Lin Yu's heart, as long as he followed Lu Feng, even the greatest of dangers wouldn't amount to anything. He would always be able to eliminate all dangers. Lu Feng was able to give him such a sense of trust. "You should move aside. Since Lu Feng wants to enter, then I want to enter as well." His voice was incomparably resolute, and it could even be said to be resolute and decisive. However, at this moment, the State Protector General stood firmly in front of Lin Yu. The State Protector General was also a high-level true immortal, and he was also a level 3 disciple. In terms of strength, he was naturally much stronger than Lin Yu. Therefore, if he didn't move aside, then Lin Yu definitely wouldn't be able to pass. Hearing Lin Yu's words, the State Protector General smiled faintly. "If even an immortal like you is in danger, then Lu Feng, who is in the pseudo-immortal stage, will definitely not be able to enter. I believe that the State Protector General Yu Feng has already brought him back." After speaking, the Imperial Protector General of the Green Cloud Imperial Empire turned and stared in the direction of Lu Feng. However, when he focused his gaze over, he was suddenly stunned. He was completely stunned. This was because he actually saw a scene that puzzled him. Lu Feng was already at the edge of the final seal, but at this moment, Yu Feng was just standing there in a daze, unable to move at all. Upon seeing this scene, the countenance of the Imperial Protector General of the Green Cloud Imperial Empire turned red as he shouted, "Yu Feng, what are you doing? Stop him." Unfortunately, no matter how loud his voice was, Yu Feng was still standing there in a daze. He didn't even move an inch. At this moment, the State Protector General seemed to have understood something as an unprecedented expression appeared on his face. At this moment, Lin Yu's voice rang out. Lu Feng might only be a pseudo-immortal, but previously he was able to suppress a mid-level heavenly immortal with a wave of his hand. Suppressed. If Lin Yu's previous performance had been shocking, then what he said this time had left these people at a loss. Everyone could clearly see Lu Feng's cultivation level. The false immortal realm was only the false immortal realm. Such a realm could not even be considered a true immortal. In the eyes of everyone here, hollow immortals were not like ants, but they were definitely weak. They were weak people who were not even qualified to be looked at seriously. But now, Lin Yu was saying that Lu Feng had once suppressed a celestial immortal? He had once suppressed a mid-tier celestial immortal? Is this even possible? In an instant, he seemed to have thought of something. The Imperial Protector General drew in a deep breath as an indescribable light flickered in his eyes. He is Emperor Realm, Emperor rank. It could only be Emperor rank. In this world, monstrous geniuses at the king stage could challenge those who were at least 5 stages above them. Monstrous geniuses at the Emperor Realm could challenge those who were at least 7 stages above them. However, monstrous geniuses at the Emperor Realm could challenge those who were at least 7 stages above them. This was because monstrous geniuses at the Emperor Realm had already comprehended the true essence of the origin source. The existence of each origin source could increase their power by leaps and bounds, allowing them to crush any opponent they faced. Lu Feng was only a false immortal, but he could suppress mid-tier celestial immortals. If he was not a monstrous genius at the Emperor Realm, then what was he? In fact, he might even be the strongest monstrous genius at the Emperor Realm since ancient times. Lu Feng, his surname is Lu. Could it be that he and that legendary existence? His face turned incomparably ugly at this moment. Lu. He also had the surname Lu. He couldn't help but think of something. But at this moment, the Imperial Protector General could only think. He really did not dare to ask, because that name represented a taboo, the greatest taboo above everything else. The first person after the annihilation of the immortals and devils, a lone existence who broke through the 9 underworlds' sunken land, suppressed the 3 holy grounds of the eternal void, and created an era of supremacy. Is there any relationship between Lu Feng and him? Exhaling lightly, they looked at Lu Feng, who had already reached the edge of the seal. They really couldn't do anything else. These people knew that even if they joined forces, they wouldn't be a match for Lu Feng. They also knew that they wouldn't be able to stop Lu Feng's existence. The Imperial Protector General of the Imperial Protector General and Yu Feng were already the strongest people present. But facing Lu Feng, Yu Feng couldn't even do anything and was completely suppressed by Lu Feng. This was enough to explain a lot of problems. Seeing that Lu Feng was about to enter the seal, Lin Yu suddenly called out from the side. Lu Feng, I'll go with you. After saying this, Lin Yu was about to step forward. But just as he took a step forward, Lu Feng's voice rang out. Lin Yu, you wait here first. The danger inside isn't something you can participate in. I may not be able to guarantee your safety in this place. If Lu Feng really used all his strength, then there wouldn't be any problem in ensuring Lin Yu's safety. After all, this was a taboo domain, a domain that belonged to the Divine King. But Lu Feng didn't want to do that, because every time he shattered the taboo domain, he would have to bear a huge burden. This was a huge loss for Lu Feng. Therefore, unless it was really necessary, Lu Feng wouldn't shatter the taboo domain. This time, Lu Feng believed that by relying on the celestial devil body condensed from his grand devil true body and its ability to restrain these demonic beasts, he would be able to exert a combat strength far beyond his limit. Perhaps, when the time came, he would be able to play a role in fighting against the demonic beasts as well as any gold immortal. Although it was indeed terrifying, his true limit was still the peak of the sky immortal fighting strength. If he brought Lin Yu along, Lu Feng didn't have any confidence in taking care of him. Hearing Lu Feng's words, Lin Yu's footsteps paused slightly. He could understand the meaning of Lu Feng's words. Although he also wanted to enter, this matter was related to his own safety. So in the end, Lin Yu nodded slightly. Turning around and looking at Lin Yu, Lu Feng was silent for a moment, then slowly said, Lin Yu, this time I might be in there for a long time. If you can't wait, then you can leave at any time. In the beginning, Lu Feng wanted to go to Huangquan Spring and Lin Langtian. The main reason was to cultivate. Now that there was such a perfect place for cultivation here, how could he just give up like this? Lu Feng felt that the existence of the great devil true body was completely to deal with these underground demonic creatures. In such an environment, his cultivation speed would reach an unimaginable speed. Although he didn't know why he had such thoughts, Lu Feng was sure, he was sure. Therefore, Lu Feng had already decided that he had to cultivate in this place. He had to cultivate properly. Hearing Lu Feng's words, Lin Yu was silent for a moment, then gently nodded. Then Lu Feng, I will wait for you here for 3 months. If you don't appear after 3 months, I will leave. Lu Feng chuckled, nodded, then turned around and directly walked inside. Young Master Lin, this is Lu Feng. Young Master Lu, what is his identity? There might be monstrous Emperor-level geniuses in Lin Lang Tian's Emperor-level sect, but it wasn't absolute. Even if there were, they would only be monstrous Emperor-level geniuses who had just stepped into the Emperor-level realm. However, the strength that Lu Feng displayed was absolutely unstoppable. Such power was much, much stronger than those monarch-level monstrous geniuses that they knew of. They cannot be compared at all. In fact, in these people's hearts, they already had a certain idea, but this idea was too terrifying, so they really didn't want to think too deeply about it. Lu Feng. He is very mysterious, very great, very terrifying, very extreme. His existence, there is no way to know, but I can understand and feel that his appearance has caused this era to begin to change, lightly nodded. This kind of monstrous genius was definitely going to change the terror of the entire era. Back then, when that forbidden existence suddenly appeared, it alarmed the entire era, dominating the world in invincible time and space. Then, the Emperor powerfully broke through the shackles and broke through to become the eternal God Emperor. His magnificence was unparalleled, and the world admired him. I didn't expect that in less than a few thousand years, such a monstrous genius would appear. I really don't know what's going on in this era. Why is there such an eruption of so many monstrous geniuses? Puzzled. Many people were puzzled. Countless people were puzzled. I think this young Master Lu, I'm afraid, has a certain connection with the 3 holy lands, the supreme, primal chaos, and eternal. Yu Feng walked over from the side. When Lu Feng entered the sealed land, he was already able to move. And after that, he came to the side of the 2 people. In Yu Feng's heart, Lu Feng definitely had a certain connection with the 3 holy lands. Because such a monstrous genius, even those Emperor-level forces might not necessarily be able to cultivate, or even absolutely impossible. Hearing his analysis, the few people fell silent for a moment, and finally looked at Lin Yu. Lin Yu smiled lightly. I said before, Lu Feng's existence is too mysterious. It's not something you can imagine. Moreover, it's also not something I can imagine. Where exactly did he come from? I really don't know. Perhaps he really does have a certain connection with the 3 holy lands. Hearing Lin Yu's words, the few people fell silent. After a moment, they nodded lightly and didn't say anything, but focused on the distance, on the sealed land. However, they didn't see the strange light in Lin Yu's eyes. In fact, the last sentence was said by Lin Yu on purpose, because Lin Yu knew that Lu Feng and the 3 holy lands shouldn't be related. Even Lu Feng and all the sects here shouldn't have any connection at all, because regarding everything in this world, Lu Feng didn't know at all. He didn't understand at all. He didn't even have the slightest bit of common sense. Lin Yu knew that even in existence of the 3 Exuvia realm, a lone cultivator couldn't possibly not know anything about this. However, Lu Feng really didn't know. This made Lin Yu understand one thing. He thought of one thing. In my memory, that person who was crowned as a taboo, seems to also have the surname. His appearance was also incomparably mysterious, and his disappearance was also filled with strangeness. Lu Feng, you and he came from the same place. Lightly exhaling, Lin Yu had already decided at this moment that he would help Lu Feng keep this secret. The reason for that was because, in his opinion, Lu Feng was truly his friend. Lu Feng was his first friend up until now. Keeping this secret for a friend was really nothing much. Looking into the distance, Lin Yu seemed to have seen through the sealed land and saw inside Lu Feng, who was undergoing a crazy transformation. Chapter 844. The existence of a seal was incomparably powerful. With Lu Feng's strength, it was impossible for him to force his way through it. Fortunately, he had received the Sacred Gate's request to enter this place. Therefore, with the Sacred Gate's tacit approval, Lu Feng did not even need to use any power to enter the sealed world directly. This was a sealed world of darkness. In this world, one could not see anything at all with just one's eyes. If it were not for the existence of the divine consciousness, it would be difficult to move an inch in this place. It was filled with a strange and uncomfortable aura. However, Lu Feng was pleasantly surprised by this aura. What a rich aura! All kinds of laws and principles are intertwined. If it were not for the aura of degeneration and decay, this place would be a holy place for cultivation. A holy place for cultivation comparable to any famous region. After a moment of silence, Lu Feng quickly understood the crux of the matter. Everything should be like this. Those who had entered this place were the true experts of the Yellow Spring continent. They were all invincible existences of an era. Among them, there were countless immortals, true immortals, heaven immortals, golden immortals, and even immortal kings. I heard that in the depths of this place, there were immortal venerables who had fallen. Those existences themselves carried with them the origin of countless laws. When they die and this place is sealed, the laws here will be imprisoned and will never be able to spread out. Thinking of this, Lu Feng's eyes lit up with a trace of passion. Now, he was only in the distant area of the most ancient battlefield. He had not even set foot on the edge. Even so, there was still such a rich and terrifying power of laws condensed here. Lu Feng really couldn't imagine how rich the laws would be if he entered the central battlefield, the main area where countless experts had fallen. My primordial scripture, in the past, I only needed to rely on time to comprehend it. At that time, even if I wanted to help, there was not much I could do. However, ever since I died and came back to life, something seemed to have happened. I could sense that if I were to comprehend those laws and absorb those profound mysteries, my cultivation speed would actually increase slightly. Although the increase wouldn't be too heaven-defying, it would still be extremely difficult to comprehend. But it can already save a lot of time. But the profound mysteries of the laws and the true essences of strength here are simply indescribably numerous. If I were to cultivate here, my cultivation speed would increase by a lot. These laws were left behind after the fall of those powerhouses and had been refined. It could be said that Lu Feng could easily absorb them directly, which saved him countless cultivation methods. Otherwise, it would be better for Lu Feng to enter his own mind space and enter the second floor of the Babel Stupa to absorb the endless power of the nomological laws. Looking at these refined laws, Lu Feng forced himself to calm down and took a deep breath. Putting everything else aside, this place was definitely a holy land for his cultivation of the Primordial Sutra. I didn't expect to encounter such a thing after coming here. It seems like this place is just like what that phantom said. It's very suitable for a breakthrough. Lu Feng sighed, his eyes filled with excitement. His eyes were unusually dazzling in this endless darkness. According to what the Saint Gate said, there are no powerful demonic creatures here for the time being. But once I go deeper, I'm afraid they will appear. And in the deepest part of the battlefield, I'm afraid even immortal king-level demonic creatures will appear. Unless Lu Feng entered the forbidden area, there was really nothing he could do about immortal king-level demonic creatures. Otherwise, Lu Feng really had no way to deal with them. My Primordial Sutra has already been cultivated to the strongest level at the current stage. I don't need to waste time on cultivation anymore. So now, I'll go and see how powerful those demonic creatures are. Thinking of this, Lu Feng didn't hesitate and directly walked forward. During the operation, Lu Feng had been very careful. Although the battle was incomparably crazy, Lu Feng himself wasn't an ignorant person. Although the Saint Gate reminded him that the golden immortal level demonic creature was still ahead, Lu Feng didn't dare to guarantee that it was really waiting quietly ahead and didn't come over. A golden immortal level demonic creature. If it's a sneak attack, then I'll really be in danger. If a golden immortal level demonic creature gave a powerful blow, even Lu Feng's current embryonic form of invincible battle physique would be very seriously injured. After all, those golden immortals were existences with worlds. Although his physical body was comparable to those heaven-defying sacred truth physiques, and even comparable to many eternal monarch physiques, it couldn't really withstand the impact of a world. Therefore, Lu Feng had to be very careful. The deeper you go in, the stronger the seal in this place. Moreover, for those powerful demonic creatures, the power of the seal is even more invincible. And for those weaker demonic creatures, the binding power of the seal is much, much weaker. I just don't know why that golden immortal level demonic creature actually walked out of the powerful seal and came to an area far away from the battlefield. Puzzled, really puzzled. Logically speaking, golden immortal level demonic creatures should definitely be in the battlefield, or even in the center of the battlefield. But who would have thought that such a powerful demonic creature would actually walk out of the layers of seals and come here? Vaguely, Lu Feng also thought that there might be something wrong with the seal. Regarding this, Lu Feng's expression was solemn. However, he couldn't do anything, and he couldn't change anything. Although he could become an immortal king under the limit, and even make an invincible immortal venerable level attack. But after all, his body was only a virtual immortal. A virtual immortal was a virtual immortal. He really couldn't change anything. Moreover, according to legend, this place was where immortal venerable level existences had fallen before. After I get out, I'll go directly to the Yellow Spring and find Sect Master Lin Langtian. They should be the ones to worry about all of this. After a slight smile, Lu Feng stopped thinking about those useless things. At this moment, his pace was further accelerated. His divine sense had been spread to the maximum extent, and his essence, qi, and spirit had also been raised to the peak realm. Lu Feng knew that he was getting closer and closer to the dangerous place. The slightest carelessness could lead to the end of eternal damnation. Finally, after walking for who knows how many miles, Lu Feng suddenly stopped. The corners of his mouth curved into a perfect arc. This was a kind of cold arc. Lu Feng was silent, and his aura had disappeared. However, his essence, qi, and spirit had been raised to the highest level, as if in the next moment, he was going to launch the craziest attack. Waiting, endless waiting. In this dark time, it was so quiet, almost like a dead silence. But in the next moment, Lu Feng moved. His arm gently waved, but it carried with it an invincible power that made the world tremble. It shattered the era and made this space disappear. Powerful, extremely powerful. This attack definitely contained the peerless power of a high-level celestial immortal. This seemed like a casual attack from Lu Feng, but the real situation was not so. Because at this moment, Lu Feng had entered the peak realm, and the 6 supreme powers had fused into his body. The strongest battle constitution had been activated, and even his 2 souls were stirred, ready to launch an apocalyptic attack at any time. However, after unleashing that sure-kill attack, Lu Feng finally understood one thing, and that was that he was making a mountain out of a molehill just now. What appeared was a demonic creature. However, Lu Feng did not see what this demonic creature looked like, because in the attack just now, Lu Feng had completely annihilated the demonic creature, and even the space behind it was completely destroyed. The perfect arc at the corner of his mouth had disappeared, and in its place was a slightly helpless smile. This time, I thought too much, I was too nervous. This time, it was really Lu Feng who was overly nervous. The demonic creature that appeared to attack him just now was only at the level of a true immortal. It was not even a peak true immortal. However, Lu Feng's power was enough to easily suppress a mid-level celestial immortal and could fight against a high-level celestial immortal. The difference between the two was too great. Gently exhaling, Lu Feng shook his head. I have to say, this demonic creature's ability to hide in this world of darkness is simply superb. It is only at the level of a true immortal, but even I can't sense its exact location. Lu Feng's perception was absolutely at the peak. After all, he had once entered the forbidden domain of the Divine King. Many things about him could no longer be measured by his realm. Even so, he still could not sense the demonic creature's exact location. From this, one could see how terrifying that demonic creature was. Looking ahead, Lu Feng once again raised his perception to the peak. Now, he had entered the peak of his life and could unleash world-shaking power at any time and place. Even so, Lu Feng was still very careful and did not dare to be careless. This time, not too far away, Lu Feng once again felt that kind of obscure fluctuation. However, this time, the fluctuation was clearly stronger and more obscure. Lu Feng knew that it must be an even more powerful demonic creature. However, Lu Feng was not afraid of this at all. In fact, there was even a slight look of excitement in his eyes. He waited quietly and did not make a move for a long time. However, in the next moment, Lu Feng made his move and directly used an extremely domineering and powerful attack. This time, Lu Feng was obviously holding back, and the facts proved to be so. The attack disturbed a part of the void and directly hit a dark shadow out of the void, which fell to the ground. Looking at the ferocious demonic creature in front of him, which did not have any specific form at all, as if it was condensed by fog and some power, Lu Feng's eyes flashed with a hint of strangeness. After a long time, Lu Feng finally exhaled. What the hell is this thing? Lu Feng knew that this was a demonic creature, but at this moment, Lu Feng could not help but want to ask what it was. Demonic creatures exist in the 9 underworlds, sunken land deep underground. That is the real world of death. But why are the creatures that come out of the world of death also dead? Death, it was really death. This demonic creature gave Lu Feng a feeling of death. There were no imprints of any living creatures in its body at all. Such a thing could not even be compared to a divine object. It feels like it's just some stones and metals. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.